You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 545, the Acolyte Trailer Breakdown, as well as a ton of other news that was released today, thanks to StarWars.com. We thought we were going to get this last week, and turned out not to be the case. We got the trailer and so much more. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to break down, and I'm going to do this with someone you all know and love. This is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you inviting me back.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime.
It's really weird. We have a white background because we just never have white backgrounds. Usually they're darker or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really throwing me off that we have a white background for the wallpaper or whatever you want to call it this time around.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let's just why don't we do the, let's say thank you to our Patreon members and let's jump right into all the news because we got a lot to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, welcome to Jamie, who just joined This Is the Way tier. But of course, a special thank you to all of our now part of the tribe members, Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And then, of course, the Delusions Granular members, Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Daz. If you'd like to check out Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon, you'll find all the details there. Or reach out to us directly, either here on YouTube, cantinacast.com/YouTube, or any of the social medias. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you all to all of our Patreon members and everybody that's joined us for the live stream tonight. I think Jonesy's going to have some shout outs for you guys. So please feel free to chime in with any comments, questions you guys have. We'll get your name down. And at the very end, we'll do a roll call and give shout outs. So thank you all again for joining. If you've not had a chance, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. So that way you don't ever miss any of our videos when we go live. And you can see all the old past content as well. Okay. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to present here a couple of things. And one of the things I want to start off with is a bit of news that I shared yesterday. And this was the announcement that the tickets for the Phantom Menace were going to go on sale yesterday. Go on sale this Friday, I should say. Let me go back one here. And the tickets for this Friday, Phantom Menace, on top of that, we got word that they were going to do some kind of a special Acolyte feature, segment, footage, whatever it is. Officially announced today. AMC picked it up. A number of other theaters picked it up. So this does look like it's going to happen. I don't know. Your thoughts on this? Do you think we're going to get the first 15 minutes of the first episode? Do you think it's going to be something like a kind of a special sizzle reel? Any thoughts around what we're getting on top of the movie at the very end there?
I think it's going to be probably a clip from one of the episodes. I think maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that would be really cool. Just one of these extended sequences that, again, just whet our appetite. I think something we'll talk a little about tonight. I think something that gives us a little more context as to what's going on for this series as a whole, or for the season as a whole, maybe more accurately. And so I think this is a really great way. This is a great way to leverage Star Wars in the movie theaters to promote your Disney Plus content. So this is why the timing of a June 4th release, I think, was so critical and so important to be able to leverage that and bring people in that once you get past the spectacle of it, like, how do you know what's going on? And this is a great way to introduce people to that, because you're going to have a lot of people in the theater anyway to go see Phantom Menace 25.
Yeah. I mean, this is just kind of, icing on the cake that we're going to get this little bit of trailer information stuff going on here. So, so excited about that. On top of that, so the official word is after the feature, fans will also get a special first look at Star Wars: The Acolyte series coming to Disney Plus, June 2024. I do hope it's going to be a scene or maybe some combination of. Usually in theaters, when they do this kind of thing, it's like a really quick, maybe like a sizzle reel where the director comes on. Hi, I'm Leslie Headland, and thanks for being here tonight. I'm proud to show you some exclusive footage, blah, blah, blah. Or they do a couple behind the scenes things, and then they cut over to some kind of footage of sorts. I would expect it not to be anything that we've seen already in the trailer tonight. So a nice little 5-10 minute segment sounds about right. Maybe 10 minutes is probably too long. But 5 minutes, probably in the wheelhouse there. Or again, if they've done some kind of special extended trailer, right, or extended look at the Acolyte with some additional footage, I guess that wouldn't be bad. But this is just a bonus as far as I'm concerned, because we were going to go see the movie anyways. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so now it's a matter of how many times are we going to watch it and how long are you going to be in the theater for?
Exactly. Yep. On top of that, all right, so that was yesterday. Now today, of course, was the tsunami of news that we got around the Acolyte. And on top of before that, yesterday also, we did get this kind of I don't know what they're calling this, just a poster. Really cool poster. Like, this got everybody's attention. I got to say, too, from what they did the last two, yesterday, and then the way they released everything today, there is a lot of buzz. Like, I don't think we felt this kind of a buzz, honestly, since Andor. Not to take anything away from anything else that's come out, but Andor had the same kind of just momentum. It had that hot feel. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody was excited. A lot of the naysayers were kind of like, okay, I'm not really ready to jump on board and say this is going to be the best show ever, but you've got my interests, Disney and Lucasfilm kind of thing. And I think that's the same case. And it really started with this poster here. I mean, this is blood in Star Wars, just something we're not used to seeing. Now, granted, it's dried up blood, but the imagery of, a Sith saber with the blood stain, we know the Jedi are going to have a really hard time in this series in a lot of different ways. But I guess your thoughts on this, and I know you've taken it and done some creative liberty with the background that we've got tonight, which looks great, by the way. But any thoughts on the poster?
Yeah, I like it. It's edgier, right? And I think that's something that people appreciated. We haven't really had edgy Star Wars, like you said, since Andor. But with lightsabers and things like that, a little bit different. It's a different kind of edgy, and it's almost like it's being dragged. And the reason why I really liked this and why I used it for kind of our title card and thumbnail art, and why I really brightened it up, look at it, because if you actually look at the saber, it's actually gold and red, like gold, and then the red accentuates it. So it's very High Republic-ish in some kind of way. So I don't really know if it's a Sith lightsaber. It might actually be a Jedi lightsaber that is then just, tainted with the Sith, if you want to call it that, or something along those lines. But really great poster. I mean, again, it's a light background, kind of that stone that looks cracked, looks like concrete, something to that effect. Just very different than what we've had in some of our other trailers. And again, just something a little bit unique. And I think when we've talked about some of the interviews that Leslie Headland's had lately, you're going to see that kind of reversal, right? Flipping things a little bit on its head, looking at it from different perspectives. And it kind of started with the poster, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One Up CPU says, people are speculating that it's Geode on the poster. Oh, come on. That's not shots fired. I can't believe people would think that. If you're not familiar with Geode, he's a rock in the High Republic era, and that's probably oversimplifying him because he's a well-loved character, but I don't think it's Geode. That'd be horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. He's very stoic, so he could just be sitting there taking it.
He could be smiling. That's the crack that you see. That's just how tough that guy is.
Right. He's at a loss for words as to what he is seeing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Geode chat in the chat already, in the comments in the chat, which is fantastic because Geode is just such a fun character to just speculate on and have fun with.
Yeah, he's gone a little gray. Q Dude says, "Hey, gents, can't wait for this show to debut. We are with you there." I'll throw up some of these comments as we continue to work through the rest of the content here. All right. On top of that, we got the key art, which was okay. Like, it has like, it's reminiscent of the Phantom Menace, I guess, and at least Tatooine. We've got what looks to be water, but it's just the shades, the colors is all I'm saying here, right?
Right.
The symbolism of, the night going down, the sun going down, darkness about to approach. You've got what I'm assuming is May, because of the pink robes there, kind of walking off to the distance as though she's going to go off the cliff or go off the edge in some way or at some point kind of thing. I mean, you could spur up all kinds of symbolism here, but what did you think about the key art? It's a little different, I think, than we've had recently with some of the key art. Some of it's been, it's really just there to kind of not necessarily make a statement, but when you see it, you definitely know what you're looking at. And I think at least that has been checked as far as this one goes.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up shades of Tatooine. It brings up, it's a bit of a stoic kind of poster, very contemplative, but also a hint of, like you said, the setting of the sun is almost like a hint of something to come, but it's still very neutral in a lot of different ways. But I like the gold, again, the gold of the High Republic is still there more symbolically than anything else, but very, very subdued though. And so maybe not my favorite of the key art and the things that they've come out with for various content, but for what they were trying to accomplish, it's probably hitting the mark for what they wanted to show. Yeah,
no, definitely agree. It's definitely effective, if nothing else. Okay, just a few more things here, and then we'll get into the trailer. I promise.
Well, hey, quick question for you on the June 4th release date, which is a Tuesday. Are we back to prime time on Tuesday nights, do you think?
Yeah, I think we are. It's been a while since we've been there, and I think nothing official. I don't think they've released the directors and the writers for the episodes, and as well as the release dates. But I don't think we are I don't think we've actually gotten the names of the episodes just yet, which is probably going to be kept under covers for a while. But I guess I don't mind so much as a Tuesday night. It kind of plants us to do our shows probably that Wednesday, which works out well for us. I think it's an extra day that we get before we head into the weekend, and where we do double shows. But I don't know. I'm okay with it. I guess I'm agnostic in terms of what day and time.
Well, I think it's important for Disney Plus when you have primetime family viewing of a sorts. And I think this show still will be somewhat family oriented, even though it would be a darker, edgier Star Wars is what they're touting it as. But I think, back to primetime viewing is going to be important for Disney as we see this shift with some of their premiere content. And that's not to say Bad Batch is not premiere, but it is animated. It's a little bit different than your Marvel flagship shows like Echo or Secret Wars or whatever which one was called, Secret Invaders, I guess. And then I think Star Wars kind of fits in that bill too, or for Acolyte, of wanting to make sure that you get the most eyes on it. Can you make it, preferred viewing Tuesday evenings? Everybody goes back into work Wednesday talking about it. We talked about this last time we had a show like this, and I think we thought it worked pretty well. So I want to do it again. Yeah,
I'm with it. I'm down for it. They could have shown this at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night or Monday night and still would have watched it. So I'm all for it, of course. So one of the things that I've pulled up here, so on top of all of that, right, there were a number of interviews that were released today. There was a StarWars.com interview with Leslie Headland. IGN had one. Collider had one. There was, I'm trying to think, Hollywood Reporter had another, but it was just like one right after another were released around this same time frame, around 10 a.m. Central. And there were a couple things that were announced that were of importance or of interest. One of the things that stood out for me, though, is the 8 episodes total. So We're going to 8 episodes. Tuesdays, like you said, at 2 p.m. We got a 2-episode premiere. Now, that's not what I wasn't expecting, a 2-episode premiere. A lot of times we were just talking about this with the Bad Batch and how we actually like those 2-episode premieres because it does give you kind of a back-to-back scenario. They can encapsulate a lot of stuff. With 8 episodes, I don't know if it's really going to work. If nothing else, it's nice to get them out of the way. But I'm not going to turn down Star Wars. I think the one interesting thing that came out from, not necessarily in the news today, but we've not had a chance to talk about it, is the length of the episodes. And Leslie Headland is on record as saying that the episodes are somewhere between 25, 35 minutes. If you just take the average, we're looking at about 30 minutes per episode. That seems like a little on the, quote, low side, but you and I have said this many times in the show. I don't care if it's 15 minutes or an hour, as long as we're getting the story that, that's being told and it's a great story and it makes sense in the context of the story that they want to tell, I think we're okay with it. But any thoughts around the 30-minute mark? And, we'd potentially be looking at about 60-minute premiere for both episodes.
Well, I think if we've seen from any of the other content that you can do a lot with half an hour, I was kind of banking on something a little bit closer to 35 to 45, somewhere in there. I wasn't expecting an hour per episode, anything crazy like that, because it's just Star Wars just hasn't given that to us, right? It just hasn't gone anything more than, or close to an hour. Just doesn't happen very often. So I think they can still do a lot with this. I think if the show is structured and very well planned, I almost kind of like the idea of almost a rigid half hour to where you're going through that. And then your first one is a 2-parter. It feels more like an hour-long episode, like a true premiere, if you want to call it that. Well, it is, but I mean, if you want to bundle it that way, it makes sense that would go with eight shows in the series or in the season, I guess. Then it's a little like, man, we're going to get through this really fast before we know it's going to be over and we're going to want more. But I'm okay with this. I think half hour is still okay. I kind of hope maybe they'll go a little bit towards like 35, 36 minutes, just out of pure, I think interest in allowing the story to move along. But I think that's totally doable. I'm not terribly concerned about the length of the show.
Okay. There was 4 directors that were announced. We're not going to get into all names. We'll save that for another show. But any thoughts or concerns around shifting of directors? I think this has been, we've seen it with Disney Plus where it works. You could argue that in some series that have been released, whether animated or live action, it didn't work as well. Certainly Disney Plus has done this with other programming that they've done, and I think the results have been kind of mixed as well. But any concerns around that? Leslie Headland is the writer and the director for the first episode. She's only the director of the second, of the second episode. But any concerns around the mixing and matching of writers and directors? It worked for Andor, so why not?
Yeah, it did. Sometimes there's a concern, and I'm not as familiar with some of these directors to know how they're going to approach this. Sometimes it's worked really, really well, though. I think you have to be a little bit hopeful in that regard, but I think it's more that consistency. Does it feel like the same show every week? The writing is a huge part of that. Tony Gilroy enabled that to happen. So even though you have a different lens and a different view of the episode whenever you have somebody else taking it over, the writing is consistent, the performances are consistent. You still have that, that gelling of all of those things together to where the directing is maybe a different spin on it that actually makes some of it doesn't make sense, right? Is the view and the perspective that they bring, is it important for that view or perspective to be shown in that episode? And we know that this is going to toggle a bit. And we'll talk about this tonight. This Rashomon type effect where they start to look at things from different perspectives. And you can, when you change directors, sometimes that's not a bad thing because you truly do get a very different lens because somebody else structured the shots and did, even though the writing was still the same, the structure of the scenes were very different. The way the characters interact, or the different characters showing their perspectives. So some of that can come through and you actually get that more as a feel, not just the dialogue and the different scenes. So this could work really well. So I'm curious to see how well that works and if that has any kind of alignment at all, or if I'm just making things up to make myself feel better.
Yeah, I'm with you too. Like, I don't really have a concern. I think enough has been done for me, at least personally, to make me feel like, hey, the vision's the vision, and I'm willing to trust everybody until I don't. So I'm for it. Let's see where it goes. Right. Especially if this is similar to Tony Gilroy. You have a single vision in terms of the writing with Leslie Headland. This is her story. She was the one behind it all, and so when she gets in there with her group of writers, she's the one directing it. She may not be the one putting pen to paper and putting the exact words down, but she has final right of refusal on all of that as well. So it's just, more helping hands kind of thing. So no concerns there. Now, if it had been different writers jumping around and, kind of like we had the sequel trilogy and stuff like that, maybe some concern, but otherwise nothing going into this for me personally.
Well, you strike a key point, right? Because I think it's important to remember that this really is Leslie Headland's show start to finish. Like, she's already got an idea of what a second season or what subsequent seasons might look like.
Yep.
And these articles paint that, which was nice to see that in really all of them have a lot of similar themes with some unique parts that are, each one. But it is very much, we've been looking for structure and control and a defined narrative. And I think we're getting it here. You have someone who came in with an idea and they're going to see it all the way through the end. I actually really like her approach to some of this too, of saying that each season isn't leaving you on edge for what's coming next. There are open threads, but it feels like we did get closure on the main subject of the season, even though there's still a lot of ways we can go. I really appreciate that. I think that's something that's a bit lost today. And so I'm really happy to see that come back.
Yeah, I am too. In fact, her exact words were she wasn't going to leave you emotionally hanging at the very end of this season,
Right.
Which is great because we've been there, and not through necessarily with Star Wars so much, but in other television series where you're just left just emotionally drained and having to wait, months, if not years, before you get to any kind of closure or get to know what's really going on. And so it does feel like it's self-contained. And with 8 episodes at 30 minutes on average, it feels like we're going to get a very tight, concise kind of just all meat, no kind of, potatoes type story. So I think that's going to bode well for the type of storytelling and the story itself in a lot of ways. Yeah,
and Leslie Headland really seems, pretty self-aware in some of this and very deliberate in how she's approaching it, which I think is always really important. And I think we as fans should be able to appreciate that. We'll see how it turns out, but I think we should appreciate that when you have someone that's a bit self-aware of, what do I like and what are the things that exhaust you as an audience, and then how can we do that? And I think even when she talks about potential of future seasons, even wanting fan feedback, and maybe not, it doesn't necessarily change the narrative of what they want to do, but it's important to get that feedback so that you understand what's working and not working so you can make informed decisions. And again, it's her vision and Lucasfilm's vision about what they want to do, but I think that's important to at least receive the feedback and be open to it and openly admit that and openly admit that, hey, you might say it and it may not turn out the way you want, but it is an open thing that we are listening because we're genuinely curious about how you take this content. We want to produce things you want to like at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we're going to not do the vision that we have for the show.
Exactly. Yep. It's a fine point. Diego David says, I'm really looking forward to watching this, hoping it's good and they start to bring more High Republic content. Don't disagree and can't agree even more than that. Yeah, I mean, this is something when they announced the High Republic, right? It was kind of pipe dreams for a lot of us, and there was certainly a lot of potential there. We could see it after reading the first couple books and realizing, wow, there's a lot here they could do with at some point. Would we ever get there? You know, bring on Disney Plus, and yeah, things kind of opened up, and here we are. So I think you're right. I think you're 100 spot on. Like, this does feel like it's the beginning of something more, and it would be nice to, again, to get away from the Skywalker saga, get more content that's not bound to the Skywalker saga, wherever that may be. Let's see. All right. So there's, again, all these interviews were done. They had a lot of the same content, a lot of the same questions being asked of Leslie Headland. And then some of them had some unique ones. But I guess just to move things along here, was there anything that maybe one or two things out of all of the interviews that you read today that stood out for you? If you had to pick your maybe top 2, top 3 things that stood out.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned them already. You know, the seasonal structure, her approach to critical fan feedback, and you know, just performance of the show, I think, in general. I think in the Kristen Baver interview, though, it was interesting because she talked about, I think Kristen Baver, this is really her quote, Kristen Baver's quote, duality that exists beyond the simplistic black and white view of good versus evil is really going to be kind of a summary point for the show, right? We're used to, you know, the Jedi in this era a bit more dogmatic. They're a little more black and white. One of the characters is actually listed as very, you know, by the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will, you know, it'll kind of predispose the Jedi in a lot of ways in this point. And we could speculate as to why they're in this phase, of course, some of the things that maybe we're seeing 100 years before this. But, you know, I think some of that duality, and we see it in the trailer with Jodie Turner-Smith's character of Anasema, of saying, you know, it's not necessarily about power. It's about, you know, what do you do with it? It's not about good and evil. It's about power and controlling and who was allowed to do what. So it's going to be a bit more of a philosophical type of discussion in some ways, which I think we as Star Wars fans have yearned to see more of, because we got some of that in Andor. And I think that was one of the more powerful things about Andor, but now we can lay it within the context of the Jedi. And I think that's really exciting to be able to see if we could pull that off.
Yeah. I think so for me, and I'll rattle off a couple of these, and I won't spend a lot of time on them, honestly, but the Rashomon style of storytelling is very interesting to me, just as a fan of that movie. And we've seen it already in The Last Jedi. I thought it was fascinating, and I know she's taken a lot of flack for this, but one of the writers that she had never seen Star Wars before.
I think this is such a brilliant move, actually.
No, and I do. And I'm not, I mean, trust me, like, it sounds like red flags all over the place, but when you actually read the context of how it was set up, right, it makes absolute sense. She had somebody there that had never seen Star Wars and was watching it, and just hearing the anecdotal stories about how she was texting her and going, oh my God, they're brother and sister, right? But she wanted someone that was coming from a neutral place, an objective place, to kind of provide feedback and have a very different, fresh perspective. It wasn't the entire staff, as was reported wrongly before. It wasn't Leslie Headland. I'd seen people saying, oh, she's never even seen Star Wars and she's the one writing it. Turns out that was not the case. But to have that one person on a full staff, I think is a brilliant move, honestly. So I'm excited to see if we'll ever find out what came about from that, or what was done or changed because of that. The volume not being used.
Yeah, and one last part on the writer that wasn't a Star Wars or hadn't seen Star Wars. The important part to take away from that is that person was brought in to help make sure that this was a good story.
Yeah, right.
Not that it was a good Star Wars story, but is this a good story? If you take the Star Wars out of it, does it still feel like quality content that you're interested in and want to watch? That was the perspective that she wanted to bring in. And as background, the other writer went in and started watching Star Wars, right? And to get that context on it, but that was the principle of it. It was just making sure that does this feel like we're writing something really good that is going to appeal to you from from just an audience in particular, not even just a Star Wars audience, because it could be a good Star Wars thing, but maybe not necessarily great content. Why not have both, right?
Yep. Yeah, great point. Glad you pointed that out. And I mean, of course, the writer was only 10 years old, but still, the point is they had never. No, I'm kidding. They're not. I did question. I'm like, who hasn't seen Star Wars at this point? But I'm sure there are people out there. Actually, I know one person still.
I know a lot of people actually that haven't seen Star Wars.
It's kind of bizarre because we live in this bubble, right, all day long. All right. The other thing was the volume not being used. I thought that was fascinating, given, and not that I don't think it's a wrong thing. I don't think it was a knock or a slight on the volume itself, but you know, it does say something about we're going to have a lot of practical effects, and we're going to have a lot of on location type sets, and that's exciting stuff because that you know, you can see it in the trailer itself, and it brings in the nostalgia of there were probably matte paintings and other stuff, the old school stuff that they used to do for some of these sets, because you know, when they're standing in front of that forest, well, if it's not the volume, then it's either CGI or they've done a matte painting of some sort.
It's always funny how we celebrate practical effects, but then when we've seen practical effects, sometimes they've really not hit the mark. And then we're very critical of the volume. So it's always how do you shoot it? How do you light it? And how do you make it work, right? Of all of these things. But it is exciting and to see kind of a rollback to a more traditional and historical side of making a show. So I'm interested to see how they do it. And from the trailer, it looks like they're pretty well so far.
Yeah. And then the other thing that stood out was just the season 2, which we've already talked about. I'm already excited they've talked about it. It sounds like she's got a lot of ideas in her head, and this was set up as a multi-season show. So there might be a season 3 or a 4. So, and there's a lot of time. We're getting into the timeline, as a matter of fact, right now, and talk about what that would look like. But any thoughts around that?
One last thing that she also mentioned, there were 2 big EU ideas that she says are in this show. So I'm really curious what that actually means. This is in the StarWars.com article, Kristen Baver. So really curious, and she said people didn't tell her no, so she threw them in there and they're there. So I'm really curious what they are. Are they more along the, the Dark Tenebris or Plagueis type of way? Because while they're canon, there's still a lot of Legends aspects to them. Or what the heck does that actually mean? Because we know there's some things that are more EU, like they haven't been seen in canon yet, but I wouldn't call those big EU ideas. So I'm really curious what that actually is. Not Mara Jade, Mike Rondo, don't worry.
Yeah, you never know. Never know. All right, let's do the timeline. All right, so I threw this up because, and this is pretty rough. I just pulled this right out of our notes. I threw this up because I've seen a lot of people that have been very confused about where all of this kind of exists and plays, right? But so for anybody that's not watching, in 382 BBY, so 382 years before the Battle of Yavin, it fits in between what we call Phase 2, right? This is the oldest of the High Republic. I think the High Republic goes back about 500 years in total, somewhere around there, officially now for canon. That's when Phase 2 started. And then what that was think of that as the prequel trilogy of the High Republic, right? They went in the same order, told one story and they went back in time, told the next story, and they went back to the future, if you will, and told the third part of the story. 248 BBY is when Venestra Rowe is born. She is one of the characters that we'll talk about here a little bit later. She's the only character, at least right now, that's made the jump from the novels and the literature into live action on camera. In 232 BBY, that's when Phase 1 starts, and that really kind of starts with the Great Disaster, which we're not going to get into. But at that point, that's when we're first introduced to Venestra Rowe, and she's about 16 years old. At that point, she's like we'll get into her background here in a little bit. 229 BBY is when Phase 3 starts. So just a couple years later, that's after the fall of Starlight Beacon, and the Venestra Rowe now is about 18 years old, and more on her in just a bit. 132 is where we land with the Acolyte. So this is about 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. I threw Palpatine in there. He was born in 84 BBY. I think this is probably going to be a little bit more relative when we get to the very end of the trailer, and we've got some questions that we've got that I've threw in there for us to kind of poke around with. But this is about 48 years after the Acolyte is when we can expect everybody's loving baby, Sheev Palpatine, to finally make his presence. And then, of course, Phantom Menace starts in 32 BBY. Any thoughts around this? Anything like anything you find striking or fascinating, or anything I left out that you feel is like important?
No, I think this is a great starter for people, especially for may not be as familiar with High Republic. I think, it spans back 500 years is pretty crazy. And we've been largely kind of in the 200 to 300 year range, somewhere in that area. So this is a little bit new for us. We're not really sure if any other characters will have a cameo, but I think this is really important, at least and especially within the context of Venestra Rowe. In 232, she had just turned 16 when the events of Phase 1 started. And again, we'll talk about it, but this prodigious type of Jedi, and where she's at in this phase of her life as well, because they did give us, some of the interviews gave us a little bit of a background on Venestra that the trailers don't necessarily give you, but marrying the two helps you understand the character a little bit better.
Yep. Rebels comes with us. Hey, man. Hey, Albert. Hey, Jonesy. Welcome, sir. All right, let's move. Let me pull this down, and then I'm going to share the last bit before we get into the trailer, and this is going to be all of the character breakdowns, because on top of that, not breakdowns, but just the characters.
Yeah, the database entries from the Star Wars website. These are really important, though. I mean, these are, so while you're pulling it up, they were able, the trailer, while the trailer's great, it doesn't give you really clear ideas of who each of these characters are. If you read the subtitles, you get some clue, but with the actors, you kind of recognize some of them from Celebration, but They did give us little 2 or 3 sentence lines. Vanessa Rose got a lot more because she's been there for a while, but understanding who they are and where they come from and maybe some of their motives are really important for us at this really early phase of getting people acclimated to what we're going to see in the show.
Yeah. Now, what I've got pulled up now was what was announced a year ago. The only reason I brought this, this is cool because we can actually see their faces and kind of put them to their makeup here in just a minute. But we won't talk about all these. The only one I want to point out here, Rebecca Henderson is probably not recognizable in the trailer because she's Vanessa Rowe, and so she's bald and green as a Mary Ellen. And then the other person is Dean Charles Chapman. So he's not. I don't think he's officially in the trailer. I think there's one person that he may be.
I think he's in the younger Jedi, like
right.
the.
I think that's him, but I couldn't really
hair.
get a tell. Yeah, I couldn't get a good. That's probably him. I've got questions because we don't see him in any of the present day stuff. So whether or not he made it or they aged him, maybe that's a sign that he doesn't make it out of the past and he ends up dying. But he was the only actor that was announced back at Celebration Europe that we didn't officially see. And on top of that, what I should say is they didn't actually give him a character card. Every one of the other characters has got a character card on the data bank here. All right, so let's talk about May. May is the official, like the main character. May gets swept up into a sinister ministry, one that puts her into a center of conflict in unexpected ways. Now, the one thing I didn't touch on was last year when the Acolyte was announced, it did talk about how a former Padawan and her former master, Padawan and her former master were kind of at odds with one another. If you take that with the official description that they announced today and marry those two together, you can put 2 and 2 together and realize that May and Sol are the Padawan and master who had a falling out of sorts. And, Sol is kind of going through a lot of the trauma or experiencing a lot of difficulty with that broken relationship. Similar, I guess, to, you could say like Anakin Skywalker and Ben Kenobi or any one of the other master and apprentices who have had falling outs, either in the High Republic or even in some of the Legends stories as well. But any thoughts on May here before we move on?
No, we'll just keep moving. We'll get to some of this in the context of the trailer as well.
Okay. Master Sol is a wise, highly respected, powerful Jedi, strong in the ways of the Force, who is going through an emotional conflict. I'd assume this is because of what's gone on again with May and her leaving, if you will. Right. He's now taken on a new Padawan, which is Jeki. It says Jeki is a Padawan apprentice to Master Sol. Although she is young, she projects calm and conducts herself with maturity. She's an interesting character. She's one of the very few characters in Star Wars that's half human, half alien species.
She's a Thelan, yeah.
A Thelan, right? Which there's only been like 2 or 3 instances where we've had Thelans before. But this is the one that was played by the girl who did X-23.
Yeah, Daphne Keene.
Yeah, Daphne Keene. Which is funny because in one of those interviews, Leslie Headland had said that she was watching Logan and she saw her and was like, that's her. And she ended up writing this part for her. So, those are always nice stories because, they had that person in mind. But
yeah, paraphrasing that article says, I need X-23, but as a Jedi or wielding a lightsaber, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. So she definitely wanted her for that role, which is great.
I like this. I like the difference here between, and Star Wars does this a lot too, of who your previous Padawan was and who your new Padawan is. So Sol's former Padawan was May, maybe a bit brash, maybe you got the dark side. There's something spark, kind of that Anakin-ish type of mentality. Mm-hmm. And then you have Jeki here, who's almost like your Obi-Wan Kenobi of sorts and seems a bit more level-headed, doesn't jump in headlong to everything, thinks things through, much more mature and grounded. So a bit of a dichotomy there. Also maybe a good confrontation between the two at some point as well, old versus new apprentice.
Yeah, I can see that where, they do have that confrontation or that first conversation they have seems like it's going to be fired. So looking forward to that. This is Jedi Master Indara, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, aka what's her name? I forgot her name. I was going to say from the Matrix, but but this is there's not a lot here. It says Master Indara is a Jedi Master of great physical and mental skill. So
yeah, Trinity. Yep.
Trinity, thank you. Not much else to say with her character. Although I will say this,
kind of stole the show in the trailer. Yeah.
Well, not officially announced here, but it came out between Celebration Europe and now, and that's that she no longer uses a lightsaber. Her whole combat is done just to kind of like Ezra did, if you will. And we see some of that, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit in the trailer, but she does not currently wield a lightsaber, which is kind of an interesting fact.
I love it. That was really cool, actually.
Yeah. You've got Kel Naka. This is played by Jonas. We all know who Jonas is at this point, but Kel Naka is a Wookiee Jedi. is a loner who lives a solitary life.
Yeah, that's interesting for a Wookiee, right? Because Wookiees don't do this. This is not what Wookiees are. While they are kind of on their own in times, they're very social creatures. This is what we expect of them. Family's really important. So there's a backstory here.
There is. And, as far as the family aspect, you could talk about, well, maybe that's, it's almost sad if that's really the case because, family is such a big thing to Wookiees. And, he was probably taken at a very young age. He probably doesn't have roots of this family. He doesn't know them. Although you could, maybe he's an outcast somewhere on Kashyyyk at this point. But some of the things that I was kind of tossing out there, as possibilities, and certainly want your feedback if anybody else has anything else, but just, did he do like the Barash vow of sorts? Is he off doing his own thing? Is he just in exile? Is he retired? We'll talk more about what he's doing here a little bit later, but the fact that you're right. The fact that he's living a solitary life, that doesn't seem like a positive thing and doesn't seem very characteristic of the Jedi. It feels like he would be at the temple doing something, still serving the light in that way rather than just, going off and being by himself. It's uncharacteristic of a Jedi, I think, at this point. Or maybe he's like a way seeker. Not to bring that in, but that's, something from the High Republic.
That's what I was going to bring up. I mean, it's not abnormal for Jedi of this era. Well, at least in the High Republic era.
Yeah.
Maybe in this phase of the High Republic, that might be changing a little bit, but for them to find their own path or whatever. And I think they're not exiled from the order or anything like that when it says that he's a loner. So it's a curious comment to make of someone who works on their own, doesn't maybe have a Padawan, or maybe he lost a Padawan. And that's why this is, he just kind of never took another one because of the loss was so much to him and fear about the dark side and everything else. So there's a lot of different ways we could go with this character, but it'll be interesting to see how much of that is able to come out with the Wookiee as well.
Yep. The character that we have the most, and the reason why I brought her up, I love this character to death. But there's a lot here, and you can't read it. The text is kind of small here. But Vernestra Rwoh is an elder Jedi Master who has ascended the ranks of the Jedi from a teenage prodigy to a leader in the Order. She became one of the youngest Jedi Knights in a generation at age 15. This is well documented in Phase 1 of the High Republic, and solidified her status as a prodigy when she took on Emery Kantaros as a Padawan the next year. And I know there are people out there that are watching this or listening to this cheering because Emery is loved by a lot of people. He's alive. Sorry, spoiler if you haven't read Defy the Storm. With a purple bladed lightsaber that can change into a light whip. So seeing this visually, I can't wait to see it. Like, they can't put that in the data bank, and they can't give us Vernestra Rwoh unless they give it her lightsaber, which turns into a whip. Excited to see what that's going to look like on screen. But then in the year after the fall of Starlight Beacon, while mourning those lost in the destruction, including her own Padawan, Vernestra pulled back from the Order and shifted her focus to heal herself. So I know I already spoiled that last line, but outside of that, this is kind of the main character, and this is one that Leslie Headland said that she is the one, like, this is the character that she was most focused on in these 8 episodes, including May as well. But we're going to get a lot of Vernestra Rwoh and where she's at. Her age, by the way, at this point, I mean, she's well over 100 years old, which is not atypical for any Force user. Honestly, their lives are extended because they're Jedi and they're close to the Force. But yeah, she's going to be definitely an older, seasoned Jedi at this point, but she's in a different place. She's not the kind of Jedi that we see currently here in Phase 3.
Yeah, a little bit interesting of whether she's actually, it doesn't sound like she's on the council, but it sounds like she's very revered amongst her peers and maybe amongst the students as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they present this character with what we know from the High Republic for anybody that's been reading these novels for the last 3 years, I guess now, and understanding this character when she was younger and the growth pattern she's been on, and now to leap forward 100 years in her life effectively will be an interesting change for her, and to see what has changed her and to see how much exposition we get from that about what she's seen over the years. And kind of curious if we actually get some nihil drops of some of her younger days in the war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone said that in the comments, said that they would be interested in seeing the nihil. I forget who it was. Oh, it's Qui-Gon Jinn. Says, I hope there's a nihil in the show. I don't think there will be. I hate to say that because I love the nihil, like Marchion Ro. I think the closest we're going to get is to maybe the witches a little bit later. Some thoughts around that and in the Path of the Open Hand, some of the visual cues. But outside of that, I don't know that we're going to get the nihil. But, who knows? Just a couple more characters. This is Yord, Jedi Knight and Guardian from the Jedi Temple. He's an overachiever and a rule follower. his need to be a by-the-book Jedi can cloud his mind. So they usually set somebody up to die because they're not flexible. But, I don't want to, I'm not suggesting anything.
Well, and then again, this is the epitome of the Jedi right now. So does he define what the Jedi have become within this young man that, this is kind of where you start to see the pitfalls, and this is the legacy that they'll leave over the next 50 to 100 years as we get towards the Phantom Menace of where we're going to, right? So I think this is going to be an important character to see how flexible they end up being at the end of this, if there's any flexibility at all, or if it's just so rigid, and then how many other Jedi kind of abide by that same, the same kind of rule follower guidelines. There's always going to be people who kind of buck the system a little bit and push against authority, but how much are the Jedi driving some of those behaviors out of the Order from a general principle, and how many characters? So how unique does Anakin truly be, or a Qui-Gon? How unique are they by the time we get to their era? This will start to help us define that a little bit better.
Yep. Last two characters. Kamir is a former smuggler who now makes his living as a trader, procuring unusual things and enjoying a life of leisure. Procuring unusual things, usually for me in my headcanon, is Sith artifacts or stuff that shouldn't be found and uncovered. Maybe more on this a little bit later when we get to the actual logo of Acolyte and some theories I've got around that. But any thoughts around Kamir?
You always need a MacGuffin, and it's nice to have a non-Force user getting into the mix, a little bit over their head, but still very resourceful. So your Dr. Aphra types, your Han Solo types, those characters come through, and the Andor types are always kind of nice, and a bit of a refresher and a bit of a break from it equates to us normal people in some kind of way as well. Right. So this would be a good character to see how, if they need to chase a MacGuffin, sometimes you just can't do that as a Jedi. You need some help.
Yeah. And lastly, we have Mother Anicia, and she is the leader of a coven of witches who value their independence and the preservation of their beliefs and powers. I can't not look at her and think Path of the Open Hand, or maybe not exactly Path of the Open Hand, but some however many years since phase 2, which would be about the older part of the High Republic. Are they descendants in some way? After the Path of the Open Hand became the Path of the Closed Fist, did they then suddenly churn into these witches, which were still Force sensitive, which we know, I'm not spoiling anything, but the fact that we have a mother, if you look at her clothing, she's like in blue. There's one part where her hands are open, or like her palms are up in the trailer itself. Like that was the symbol of the Path of the Open Hand, palm up, palm facing kind of thing. So I don't know. It could be just an extension of that, the lineage of that, what eventually became of them after what happened during phase 2 of the High Republic. But it could be just, another group of witches. She did say they are not Night Sisters, though. So for anybody that's got that in their head, just go ahead and scrub that right out now. And we'll get into more of the symbolism, too. We'll talk about the kind of the spiral there, or the little, that spiral thing that's on her forehead. But any quick thoughts on her?
I am so intrigued about this character because we were one of the ones that when Jodie Turner-Smith talked about this character at Celebration, we were very curious because it did seem like she was suggesting Night Sister stuff. But I love this, that it's High Republic, right? So even though the Path of the Open Hand is no longer around in that capacity, we're still having potentially some legacy of that organization still exist, and this fanaticism that goes along with it. And she has the title of Mother. She has these people around that seem to be somewhat worshiping her. Mm-hmm. Very, very similar type of behaviors. The way that she moves in the trailer is just so cool, and but it's still very much reminiscent of Phase 2 in the High Republic. So if you enjoyed that era of High Republic, I'm really curious to see if we have a lot of great connections here with that and what the legacy of some of that was, because I've been really curious what the overall enduring legacy of the Open Hand would actually be, rather than the Closed Fist and whatever else. So yeah, really intrigued where this character goes.
Yeah, because I think not to get into a breakdown of the Path of the Open Hand, but at its core, you kind of understood what they were doing, and they weren't necessarily violent. They just had some bad apples with a lot of influence that took them down a different path. And at some point, maybe the purists are what we're seeing here, the extension of those purists, the people that truly believed in the right cause and weren't, conflicted by the evil and the quest for more power. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. So, lots of thoughts there, a lot of things that we can still break down, but excited to see where this character goes.
What do you say we get into the trailer now?
All right. So the moment I know, people have already dropped it. Like, these guys lied to me and said that we were doing the trailer. They haven't touched the trailer. We're going to touch the trailer.
I'm excited.
Right
I'm glad you put the effort in to bring all that, forward for us to talk about, because I think it's really important to help ground ourselves and, give us a good baseline here before we get into it. And we've got a lot of people watching. They're enjoying every minute, I hope.
Man, I really hope so. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk through the trailer. I promised on social media today that we would talk also about the things that were removed from the Celebration trailer. And I would say for the most part, I don't know. I mean, originally I heard that it was only going to be a couple of things and it was the same trailer. It didn't turn out to be the case. I would say for everything they removed from the Star Wars Celebration Europe trailer, they've added in additional stuff. So some things were removed, and we'll certainly touch on those. But for the most part, I would say maybe about 60% of it is the same, and maybe the other 40% is different, all in. I don't know, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, and again, they kept the things. I think the overall narrative is there. Some of the things they trim, we'll talk about that. Did it lose anything? No. Did it gain something? Yeah, I think so. And again, it's important to keep something unique and special to Celebration, and that they gave us something new and fresh while still a lot of similarities. I think it's totally fine. I think the way they approached this was the way to do it.
Yeah. Now we can't show the footage, but if you message me, I'll send you the stuff. No, I'm kidding. We can't show the footage, but we'll certainly talk about it and give you the best description that we can. All right. So we open up on what I'm assuming is the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. It looks very similar in terms of the tone and the colors, the palettes, to what we saw in the Kenobi series, more than maybe what we saw in the Phantom Menace. I don't really care one way or the other. That's not important type stuff.
Yeah, the background looks like Coruscant when you look out the window behind Master Soul. So
exactly.
I think that's a pretty safe assessment.
And for the most part, just to kind of touch on the trailer from Celebration, this is exactly the same thing that's going on. You've got Master Soul walking around. You've got a bearded kid, which, that seems kind of sad that this kid's already got a beard here. This, what is he, a Tarsant?
Yeah, or he's amazing because he has a beard.
Or maybe he's amazing because he has a beard at such a young age. That guy. I mean, that poor kid's already got a shave and he's got, itchy beard at times. But for the most part, the same stuff is happening here on the Star Wars Celebration Europe trailer. We get the lines of "close your eyes can deceive you. We must not trust them," has been said as nauseum today all over social media and video. This is a callback, of course, to A New Hope and Ben Kenobi's lesson to Luke Skywalker. Let's see, let me keep on going here. What's different here a little bit later is the questions that he asks when he's asking about what they see. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. This is the same kind of footage here where we've got May walking in. She's got her purple robe, which, okay, just pause real quick. Do you think this robe, do you think there's any connection between May and Vanestra Rowe? And the only reason I'm saying that is because the one thing that I know may sound trivial about Vanestra Rowe is her love for purple, and which goes back to Justina Ireland, who created the character, right? Christina Ireland's like just obsessed with the color purple. Everything that she signs is in the color purple. If you buy a book from her, it's in the color purple. She gave her a purple lightsaber for that reason. But it's this robe, this cloak that she's wearing, the robe that
has purple hair. Yeah,
has purple hair. Yeah, exactly. So I, just thinking, I don't know, maybe there's some symbolism there or some relationship. Maybe this is her robe or some sort. But I just find it interesting that she's an assassin, which I'm going to say that I don't know if that's true or not. But maybe an assassin or this dark kind of character, yet she's walking around with a purple robe, which seems uncharacteristic. Maybe it's an Easter egg. Any thoughts around that, or am I overthinking it?
I took a different approach. I took purple as the combination of red and blue, and she's not quite all the way dark, but she's also a legacy of being a Jedi, it sounds like. And you just have someone who's kind of in that in-between stage of trying to figure life out and figure out which path is for her. And also it's just something unique to help her stand out, I think, just from a cinematic standpoint. What's really interesting is where she's at, though. The reminiscent of this actually reminds me of like Outlaws, the video game trailer that we got.
Yeah,
it kind of feels like that. It also feels a bit like Batu for going into the marketplace and some of those.
Jakku as well.
Jakku, yeah. So it's very.
This is all from the Ralph McQuarrie art that he did. This one, remember that one scene he had that he did, right. That one picture? They pulled all that right out of there.
Yeah, so I love the symmetry that, again, with Star Wars, you're thrown right into it, and it feels exactly like you're right where you're supposed to be. When some of the environments that we're seeing, even in the fight scenes with like this temple-like structure or with Cantina, all feel very much like we're right at home within these worlds that they're creating. Whether we are used to, whether we know what they are or not, they still feel right.
Wonder if that is Batu.
It kind of feels like Batu with the spires and
Yeah,
some of
spires in
the
the
rock
back there.
formations in the back. It kind of felt like Batu. So I
Mhm.
think that I think it would make sense for them to go there and do a little self promotion in some ways, and you can just name drop it and move on. You don't have to get all crazy about it. So
Yeah, that speeder in the background too. I don't know if you can see it right there. It's one of those crotch rockets that Rey's riding around in during The Force Awakens as well. You can see it. Somebody parked it right there. But yeah, definitely like this, and certainly again, looking at this and seeing the amount of effort and time they put into the sets and stuff. Again, reminiscent of Andor in a lot of ways, but I mean, this is good quality stuff. It doesn't look cheesy or cheap in any way. And not going to call any other series out where I've had scenes where I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But definitely did some good production value here with the costumes.
well, and the contrast, right? People dancing, smiling, having fun in the streets. It's people engaging actively in lively ways compared to what we see in Andor, that the more dour type of thing, that everybody kind of scurrying along, keeping their heads down, the oppressiveness of the Empire. Very different
Very
phase,
different
and some of that you definitely get a feel for right away. Of this is a different galaxy at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, things are good right now for the most part. I mean, yeah, they had the Nihil and a couple of mishaps, but satellite came from flying out of space and crashed into a planet, killing millions. But besides that, everything else has been going swimmingly here.
But those days are 100 years in the past by
Yeah,
now,
no,
right?
I'm
So
saying.
yeah, so a lot of time's passed and things are back to being pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, all those people are dead. No one remembers that anymore. Okay, so this is where things get a little
That was
different between.
horrible,
I know,
Albert.
sorry. Things get a little different here between the celebration trailer, but we get for this one, Soul's talking about tell me what comes to your mind. He's telling everybody to close their eyes, and then there's this one kid here who can't close his eyes. That one poor alien that's got his eyes open doesn't even have eyelids, so he can't close his eyes. But we get the three kids. We cut back over. Sorry. We're cutting back over now to May walking into what I'm calling the cantina. That's kind of just an extended scene that we just saw here. She's coming in. Lots of aliens in this trailer as well, which I thought was nice to see. Someone did a good job of documenting all of the alien races, and it feels, most of these we've seen before, but a lot of them we have not. Some of these are brand new alien races that we're seeing for the first time. Certainly the guy slurping noodles is not. I forget that alien race, but that's not a new one. But the first youngling says life. The second one says balance, and the last one says fire as she continues to walk through the cantina, making her way to the back. We'll talk about that here in a second. Here's the alien I'm talking about on the right-hand side. He has no eyelids, and he's supposed to close his eyes. So that seems totally unfair and feels like he's being singled out. But this one youngling here says, I see fire. I know a lot of people have been speculating this. I think I'm on board with this being May, and this is a flashback. And so we may have flashbacks, at least to this time frame. I think a little bit later when we see what I think is May is probably another time that we're going to flash back. So we may have kind of a several time periods that we're kind of jumping in back and forth. I don't have a problem with this. I know earlier on when Star Wars television started and Disney took over, there was a lot of debate, a lot of contentious discussion around whether or not flashbacks were really, quote, a Star Wars thing. They are. And I think we're okay with it. I think I'm fine with it. And I actually enjoy the way the story is told through flashbacks. I think they've done a good job. So no concerns here for me.
Yeah, and we saw Vanessa Rowe in the background of this room as well. So this is even 10, 15 years before the actual events of what the present will be. So just a little bit of context about maybe how far back this is. These kids look like they're about 5, 6 years old, something like that in human years. So when we see them later on, they seem like they are teenagers or maybe closer to 20 years old, something like that. So a good 10 to 15 years gap here between past and present within the context of this show.
Yeah, the Vanessa Rose standing right there in the back there. Sorry about that.
Yep.
The only thing on this one, though, this robe does not exactly look like, it's hard to tell with the coloring, but it doesn't look purple to me, at least on my screen. So I don't know if this is a different person or they've, a lot of times they'll do this with a trailer. They'll kind of cut two pieces together and we're led to think there's some continuity there, and there isn't when we actually see it. But I don't know that it makes a difference. But this robe does look a little bit more tattered than the robe that we're suspecting was made just a few seconds ago walking into this cantina area.
Yeah, whether May would walk right back up to a Jedi that presumably recognizes her with Carrie-Anne Moss's character. I've already forgot.
Who's in the background? I think that for sure in the back there.
Right. Yeah, and that's Indara, sorry, Jedi Master Indara. Yeah, so yeah, she's in the background, so that May would just walk right up to her seems a little unlikely if they're going to end up fighting a little bit later on. But again, we don't know the context quite yet. But a little bit of wizardry here with the rotating of the camera and the shadows and the the lighting is very different in the Cantina here. Of course, a lot more browns and these muted colors, so the purple doesn't pop out as much with the dark shadows.
I still can't get over he has no eyelids. So if this is May, saying I see fire, this is probably a force vision, or she's seeing what we see a little bit later down the road here with the forest on fire. We get to see her running kind of through.
Well,
that.
It's kind of almost a callback to like Rise of the Red Blade, the Inquisitor book that Lauren covered. I think there was a different perspective. You see everybody when they close their eyes and touches the force, they view the force, and the High Republic is very much like this.
Yeah.
Some see it as a song, some see it as other things. And again, sometimes it's a fire that rages inside of you, and that makes the Jedi really nervous. So that someone would have that and maybe be marked in a certain way is an interesting thing. And of course, the vision that we get later on, I think you're right on the money. I think it's probably just a slightly older May after something happening.
Yeah, because I think if they went with this is how she interprets the Force, that seems like it's encroaching on Bel Zettifar, because that's how he interprets the Force, is through fire. But again, a lot of time has passed too, so they're not exclusive to a and not a unique kind of a perspective on how they see the Force. So I'm sure multiple Jedi see the Force as fire.
Maybe her last name is Zettifar.
Oh, wouldn't that be you heard it here first. Put
Just
that
like
down. Mark
dad.
the time.
Well, yeah, I didn't even make the contact or the connection to Bel. So
Yeah. Whoa, that's deep, man. It's not even in the show notes. That's just right off the cuff there for
put it on social media so we get credit for it.
Yeah, and then we'll take it right down as soon as it's wrong. So this is where we get the first of them fighting. Before I do that, so here's the difference. So right after we saw the last scene here. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. The kids here where they're kneeling down and we get that whole life, balance, and fire. That's not in the celebration trailer. Instead, we continue to hear Soul talking to the kids while some of this other footage that we've already shown here is rolling. And he goes on to say, the Force is powerful. It is power we must respect. Now, this plays into the line that we get later from Anasia, talking about how the Force is power and it's not about good, evil, it's about control kind of thing. And he's saying that as there's kids still meditating and she's walking into the cantina. It's kind of just overlaid with that. Outside of that, so far, we're pretty much beat for beat in terms of the different trailers.
Yeah, and again, I love the different perspectives of saying the same thing between the two trailers, and I hope the Jedi still say that. I hope that's when we actually get to this scene, that we get all of the dialogue and it's all still there, and that we hear it again with Mother Anasia, because I think that's something that we can draw on, because those were some of the themes in phase 2 of the High Republic that were also there. Of we're all kind of saying something similar, but we all have a very different way of getting there.
Yep. I'm assuming this scene too of Master Indara, I should say. I keep saying Indira because I'm thinking of Indira Stokes from the High Republic. Master Indara, she's turning, she's looking at someone. I'm assuming this is the person that we just talked about walking in
she's
with
on
the
her
robe.
She's on her own now because she's at a table with people before. So I'm wondering if this is where the actual fight takes place. So she's waiting for them. She's sensing them. So she goes to a different level, or maybe the room they're closing or whatever. But it kind of seems like they're in a different space now.
Yeah, I can see that. She does have a very suspicious look on her face where she's weary of whoever's walked up on her.
I'm eating lunch. Leave me alone.
Right. Don't you see there's still food on my plate? Waiter.
I was having a girls' night out, and you've ruined it.
Yep. Here's the fight. Now, we can talk a little bit about the fighting style itself, but again, this is where we're seeing her demonstrate her use of the Force and her Force abilities without the use of her lightsaber, because honestly, had she pulled out her lightsaber, this battle would have been over real quick, because you don't bring a steel blade to a lightsaber fight. That just never ends well for anyone. But right. Any thoughts, I guess, on them fighting and why they're fighting?
Oh, man, I actually just want to talk about Master Indara's costume here, actually. But I mean, if May has something against the Jedi, right, then, and again, they talk a little bit later in the trailer about someone's killing Jedi, she's caught up in something, and you could speculate a little bit that she's here to take out, or maybe they just have a disagreement and it just escalates. And she's got the mask on, so she's still having this assassin type of vibe, right? The wrapped boots and everything. She's just very much dressed like Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat or any other assassin that we've seen on screen before. So it's something along those lines, but I have a feeling that Master Indara knows who this is.
I think she does too. I mean, this is May, right? I mean, this is
Right.
Ooh, this is her new life after she's left the Jedi Order. You can see here also Master Indara's.
She does have a lightsaber.
She does have one. She just apparently she doesn't use it. So she's in her. Let's talk about the robes real quick, because again, this was covered in the articles. She talked in actually 2 or 3 of them about the robes and the costuming for the Jedi here. When we get to the High Republic during Phase 2 and Phase 1, and even in Phase 3, let's just be honest, in Phase 3, they're going out on these missions and they're wearing their most celebratory garments that they have, because they don't have anything else, honestly, right? They're going out and they're wearing these gold and white and these very rich looking kind of high class type High Republic era robes. And we know at some point they're going to go to the dirty browns here. And I think this is probably that transitional phase, because in some scenes we see them wearing those robes. And in other scenes we see them wearing the browns. Leslie Headland had said basically, if they're going to go out into the field and do field work, then they're going to change into these now. But it's still a little bit different than we saw in Phase 1 and in Phase 2. So here you can definitely see where she's got her brown, but it does look like she's got maybe the nicer white looking, more intricate design type robes underneath. Whereas when we get to like the Phantom Menace and you see Kenobi and those Jedi, they look like hobos, they look like bums. They don't really have anything, but you can see some ornate designs and on the robes themselves there.
Yeah, I really love this because it's still there. It's almost like rays from the sun from kind of her shoulder.
Coming across.
And cascading, and kind of cascading down across her torso. And so I love that we still get those vibes of light and the purity of the Jedi, but also, like you said, we're starting to get more grounded, a bit more like you're calling more like field status, but just something a bit more humble in the way that they dress, and it's not as ornate and in the face. Because I think even in the High Republic books, you start to see some people view the Jedi as a little bit proud of themselves. They do have a bit of an ego developing. While they intend to do good, sometimes they do come across as with a bit of an ego when they talk to people, even though I think they mean to do well. So it's nice to see this, and that I think they've struck a really nice balance of bringing that into this show while still helping ground you into like, wow, they do feel like Phantom Menace Jedi, but there is something unique about them. And that makes sense because supposedly this is the highlight, one of the heyday of the Jedi is still going on. So I like that this is a really solid balance that I think fans of the High Republic will appreciate. And it will also not necessarily alienate people from the prequel trilogy coming in a little bit cold. And it's not over the top and we changed dramatically over 100 years. So I think this is a really good balance they've struck here.
Yeah. And we'll probably talk more about the lightsabers a little bit, but since we've got one kind of in focus here, I just want to touch on it. And you mentioned it a little bit when we were looking at the poster with the lightsaber. When we start off with the High Republic during Phase 1 and Phase 2, similar to the robes, their Jedi hilts are very ornate. Like they take years to be built because it's something that's always going to be with them. And they really don't use them much for anything. Because again, there are no Sith. Yeah, they've got bad guys, and the Nihil ended up changing a lot of this. And at some point
they were more ceremonial. Yeah,
they were more ceremonial probably for usage, right? But at some point they start something up called the Guardian Protocols. And the Guardian Protocols are what change a lot of things about the Jedi that we see by the time we get to the Phantom Menace. One of the things is they no longer make these ornate ceremonial type looking Jedi lightsabers. They make these down and dirty, similar to what we saw with Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi, where they're more practical lightsabers. They can crank them out a lot faster because they are at war. They don't have to wait. They're just cranking these suckers out, very quickly. And we can see that here, where it still has the gold and silver. I think that's an interesting choice to have, but they're not as the cross hilt or the really elaborate designs on the outside that we saw going in.
Yeah, they set up sabershop.com so they could mass produce these things a little bit more. But I like it. It's the masters that maybe have something a little bit more because they've fine-tuned it over time, over the course of their lifetime. It would make sense that they would have something not necessarily ornate, but something a bit more attuned to what their habits and their fighting style and whatever else might be that is more akin to them. Or, if Indara here has, sworn off fighting with lightsabers, maybe it's not hers. Maybe it's something of a memory of a Padawan or something along those lines too. So it'd be interesting if there's any other backstory to go along with that.
That's true. That's a good point. We've had a lot of Jedi, especially in the High Republic, that carry the lightsabers from their former masters or Padawans or other Jedi they were close to as just kind of a, a symbol, a keepsake symbol for them in their memory kind of thing.
Yeah. Hi, Keith Trennis and Skier. Might be looking at you.
Yeah. By the way, issue 5 just came out. Ooh,
Yeah.
that one's deep. So one other thing that came out of the Guardian protocols, and we see it here, we see it in the Phantom Menace, and that's just the acceleration of Padawans. So where Padawans would normally go become Jedi, or they would go from youngling to Padawan, and there was a lot of time that was spent before they went through the trials and became a Jedi Knight. They pulled a lot of that back, and so kids that were 10, 12 years old are now given the rank of Jedi Knight, and that acceleration was again because they were at war with the Nihil. And so when we see the Padawans or the younglings and some Padawans in the Star Wars Celebration Europe trailer, all of that aligns and is a byproduct of the Nihil. So again, just pointing out some things that are a little bit different and kind of the origins of why they're different. So back to the trailer now, though. So I got a question. So the style of fighting here is very reminiscent. I think you called it out. You texted me and said something about like it was very kung fu-ish in fighting. Yep. You mentioned that Leslie Headland had said that she was going to be pulling some stuff from EU. I think of Terrascasi, even though that's not technically EU, it's now been canonized. But could it be that this is the art form that we're seeing here in effect, do you think?
That's possible. I mean, I think especially within the context of a Force user using it, I think it's possible. I don't know if we'll get a name drop with some of this stuff, but I think it's entirely plausible.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing too that I noticed about this is the fighting style itself looks very different than what we saw during the Ahsoka series and a lot of the other series too. It did seem similar to Solo, some of the fighting styles that we saw there.
Yes.
And I think
of course that's what Kira was trained in. Yeah.
That's what Kira was trained in, was in Terrascasi, and that's where we got it officially, I think, as part of canon. But interesting enough, I was going back and I was watching the interview that Jonas and I already forgot the other guy's name. They did an interview at Star Wars Celebration last year, and they talked about how Jonas had said that the crew that came out to do all the combat fighting and the stunt choreography was that crew again from Solo. So
cool.
I think that probably another check. I'm not going to say that it is, but it looks similar to me, the fighting styles themselves. It's really low, grounded. You saw, and I'm thinking of the Kira fight that we saw. Who was the other guy, the main bad guy when he was fighting too?
Voss.
Yeah, Voss. All of that seems very similar, but I wonder if that is, I mean, the styles look the same because we have the same people behind them in real time, real life kind of thing. But it would be interesting to see if they just kind of brought that over. I wouldn't put it past Leslie Headland based on what I read today. It seems like she doesn't give a what, and was like, just throw the name in there. Who cares? So what are they going to do? Stop me kind of thing. And so who knows? Maybe they do call it out and say that she is a Terrascasi user.
Yeah, but absolutely, to go back to your original question of the fighting style, I love the use of only the Force. I think this is so great to be able to see that the Jedi don't need a lightsaber to be super effective and to completely dominate an opponent, which we see here and then we see a little bit later on when they resume this fight scene. This is just really cool stuff. I think this is just great. This is what we've wanted to see for a while of what is a Jedi without their lightsaber. And man, Carrie-Anne Moss is just killing it here. And Leslie Headland did make comments about some of the actors, especially Lee Jong-jae, Amanda Stenberg, and Carrie-Anne Moss doing a number of their own stunts. Daphne Keene did as well because of using that experience and just how much they just leaned into it. And I think that's going to come across on the screen. It's going to be fantastic.
Yep. I'm looking forward to more of the fighting styles and the fighting going on here. Last note, and I promise to move on. When I saw this, it looks like the concept art for Darth Maul when it was like that female character with like the long braids in front of her face. You remember that? A darker skin looking character?
Wow,
it was really, really early on. But
it was funny you mentioned that. Some of the character of May reminds, in the premise of what's going on, kind of reminds me of Legends Shadowhunter, the Darth Maul book that I believe Michael Reeves wrote. And some of that of like stalking and hunting his first Jedi kill, in that moment. And some of what we have here within the context of the Sith and maybe why are they emerging, it kind of reminds me of some of that stalkerish type of behavior, what's going on with the Jedi.
Yeah. I like that because that could be, we could be looking at the precursor or the pre-concepts of what they eventually become, like Sith assassins like Asajj Ventress, right? Okay, from here, we get into Yord walking in, or Yord's voiceover saying someone is killing the Jedi. I'm assuming this is May, and I'll get into my theory, I guess, of what's going on. But it seems like this is May walking up to well, it is, because you can see the purple in the next shot here. At least I can. An unsuspecting Jedi. I'm assuming this is exactly the Jedi robes that we talked about, the white hooded robes that they wear. They put these on whenever they're knighting their Padawans or if they're going to a formal ceremony. But this person looks like they're unsuspecting, or maybe they are. I don't know. It feels like they don't move here when May comes out and attacks them. But we get the first premise of the storyline that someone is going around killing the Jedi. I've got some thoughts around that I want to say to the very end as far as the why this is happening. But interesting the way she kind of either pulls her stab. You can see her almost kind of stop and pull. She kind of stops right there. And he doesn't flinch, which I thought was very interesting. But any thoughts around who the heck this person is and why would they not be trying to stop an incoming attack like this?
No, I don't know who it is, but I think they don't have any concerns about it. It looks like someone might be stopping her with the Force, the way that she's so far away still and isn't able to really complete the swing. So, and again, clever cutting is
Right.
misleading some of this. And also,
Yeah.
I think with May, I'm not under the impression that May is actually the one out there killing Jedi. I'm kind of wondering if May has been given this task, because again, and this goes back to some of the descriptions, that she gets caught up in all of this stuff. Not necessarily that she's doing it, but maybe she's been tasked to try to prove herself. So if she is the titular character of the Acolyte, maybe she needs to prove herself by killing a Jedi, or maybe that's how she thinks she needs to prove herself. But I'm kind of wondering if she's actually done it yet. And so maybe she's out there trying to score her first kill. But again, they're not as easy to take down as maybe she thought they were.
And I'm kind of in the same boat. By the way, May seems to be wearing like plated armor. You can see it right there. It's definitely a shine.
Yeah.
I don't think she's the one either. Like, I think this is it's one of those, and I hate to it's going to sound very tropish, but I do have a feeling like she has either been hired to go find the person that is killing the Jedi or something, right? And she's gotten mixed up where suddenly people think that she is the one, and she just happens to be on the same path who I'm assuming, we didn't talk about Master Indara, outside of that she has great kung fu fighting. I think Master Indara is probably the Jedi that's been assigned to go kind of investigate and figure out why the Jedi are dying, and their paths just keep crossing. And so there's kind of there's an assumption on Indara that May is behind it. And so they're getting into fights. She's probably getting away. She just happens to be at every one of the crime scenes kind of thing. But I think they're both in the same path. And I think that's ultimately why they're after her. And they're just kind of drawing two and two together. Like, oh, she was a Padawan at some point. She probably left the order not in good favor. She became kind of a darker character, was exiled, whatever it is, right? That throws Soul into kind of the emotional torment that he's in. Then suddenly she comes back into his life years later, and she's this assassin that keeps showing up where Jedi are dying. And I think that's where we're kind of led down this trail to believe that this all is kind of linked together. But I'm with you. I don't think she's behind all this. I think she's probably on a separate path to try to find out what's really going on.
Yeah, and I guess do you actually see her hair in this picture? I'm kind of wondering if it's actually her. Okay, we do see the hair.
Yeah,
okay,
and she's got the mask that she was wearing when she was fighting.
I didn't know if maybe, again, if she was part of a cult or something, you could have multiples doing it, and she's just kind of caught up, and she's maybe not the one doing it, but she's associated with them already. But no, that does look like her. Okay, that is the hair. Was having
that definitely looks like the Force is stopping her. I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah, I think she's being stopped by somebody.
Yep. And it could be this person. Maybe he's just that powerful that he doesn't need to see and doesn't need to move. I mean, he looks
very
like to be
awkward because his hands are like semi outstretched in front of him, like he's holding something.
Yeah, he's holding like a bowl or
the ancient Jedi texts.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It could be him. Going back to the Star Wars Celebration trailer, this is where we get some scenes that were cut out. There is somebody walking on an ice planet at this point. It's the ice planet that we see the Jedi shuttle or whatever that ship is that crashes a little bit later. They're walking up. There's another scene that's Master Soul, and he's bowing to some Padawans. They're not the younglings. These are older kids. They're definitely older. And I think that might be a flashback to when we see what I think is an older May running through that forest on fire. It's probably that time period.
Right.
But he's definitely bowing in front of a number of Jedi Padawans in the temple. You see Master Yord who's he's in his white robes, and the camera's kind of panning around him as he's talking. It almost looks like he's debating or he's deliberating on something. I can't really tell. His finger's kind of up in the air, but he doesn't look like he's under duress or anything. He's just kind of standing there talking, debating, or whatever he's doing. And then we cut to some Nemoidians that were completely cut out of here. I don't know what their part is, but we get two Nemoidians. There's one that's he kind of turns and looks at the camera. He looks a little bit concerned, I guess, as much as you can see from or detect.
They look a lot better. They look a lot better than the Phantom Menace Nemoidians.
They do look a lot better than those, that's for sure. And then there's another Nemoidian in the background. I don't know if it's the same two from the Phantom Menace. I hope not, or maybe that would be cool. I don't really care one way or the other, but definitely two Nemoidians in there that were cut out of this trailer. And then there's someone who's scaling what looks like a temple. They're literally crawling up the side of the temple. It's kind of a long shot. It kind of looks like the temple that we see a little bit later, similar to like maybe the Yavin temples, if you will. But they're like scaling the side up the side of the wall. Yeah,
and it might even be where they're at in this fight scene here, where she's trying to stab this person. Or the one where she's actually fighting Master Soul.
Yes, we get that a little bit later.
Right.
But it definitely looks like May. It looks like the May character climbing that up. And then there's the last scene that we see that was cut out is what I think is May. She's kind of her back's up against the wall, and she's kind of peeking around the corner of a hallway, almost like she's sneaking in. Again, if we're just kind of drawing things together, it's probably on her way to go do this type of assassination or attack this person. She's trying to sneak around and make her way through the temple.
So, she needs a bigger weapon.
Yeah, I don't know why you would come with this. I mean, that's like a 2-inch blade, man. Come on.
I mean, you open your mail with that type of thing.
Exactly. It's a letter opener. And so again, those were cut out from the Star Wars Celebration Europe footage. Let's see. We get to the temple now, back to our trailer here, the new trailer. Not temple. I guess this is a cave system of some sort. I'm not exactly sure where they're going or why they're in this cave system. You can definitely see Yord there. He ignites his Jedi lightsaber, his Guardian lightsaber, which is nice to see. The yellow. Maybe they'll finally give us the origin and officially tell us exactly what that is. Even though they did it in the Clone Wars, it would be nice to see it present day. Let's see. We get the voiceover, I think, at this point that Yord says it doesn't make sense. This is a continuation of him saying that someone is killing the Jedi. He looks like he's been in a battle here. Like he's sweating. He looks cut up. He looks bruised in some ways.
It's the effects of the final battle that we see at the end of the trailer.
Oh, maybe he survives
because he's in that battle. Yeah,
could be. Let's see. Okay, so this scene is got a lot of people talking, and mostly because of the Keldor down there in the bottom right hand corner.
Right.
I think this is Plo Koon. Like, I don't see why it wouldn't be him. There are other ones out there. I'm not saying there's not, but as far as the timing goes, and I forgot to jot down his birth year, but the timing makes sense. The only thing I would say is I don't see some of the other Jedi that we see in what I would call the present day, meaning the present day of the trailer, or at least of the Acolyte. So I'm wondering if this is a flashback of some point, maybe a few years. I can see Indara here, what looks to be Indara right here. And up in the front, that does look like Master Soul. But I don't see anyone else. And I don't know that these are the exact same Jedi. Well, they kind of do. They kind of look like the Jedi at the very end, but we don't see a Keldor in that final scene either. So again, I'm not drawing a lot of conclusions here between the different scenes because they do this to us a lot of times. They split things up. But the takeaway, I guess, is I think Plo Koon is down there in the bottom right-hand corner, and they look to be looking at a force, and I would assume maybe they're going to search for Kel Naka for some reason. He's got information, or they need to connect with him in some way. But any thoughts, or I guess what jumps out for you, or any thoughts around this scene?
Yeah, so just to answer your question, Plo Koon would have been about probably 225, 230 years old in this series. So very much, because I think he lived to 380 something years old. So at the time of the Clone Wars. So I think very much possible and very relevant in this time period. And yeah, this does look like our merry band in the present. We see the Thielen there in the from the back, Daphne King's character, and some of the others. So, but yeah, going into the Force, the precipitative of this, and again, Kel Naka, we get here in just a minute down there already, or actually the very next scene, looking around, kind of looking like he's investigating something. Maybe they've found something. Maybe there's a body. Maybe there's something going on down here, and they're catching up with him or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think I had asked the question about what he was doing here, because he looks to be working on something. And then I started thinking, oh, maybe he was, burying somebody. That's a little dark. Doesn't necessarily have to be the case. One of the things that stood out to me was that what they call the chonmage, which is the haircut that he's got there,
Right.
similar to what the samurai used to wear a long time ago. I like that idea. I like that they brought that in with the Wookiee. And yeah, I've never seen a shaved Wookiee, but there you go. That's what they look like for the
I
first
like the
time.
look. I mean, I love the way they did the face. I mean, the face actually has expression, and you can actually kind of see the age. And so they did a really nice job with this. It doesn't look like just every other Wookiee that we've seen. There's actually unique characteristics to Kalnaka.
Yep. Okay, so he's definitely working on something. Okay, so this is interesting. So you got Master Soul here, what I was assuming present day. We know this is a convict because of the subtitles. I think the convict says something about I felt the darkness or something like I sense darkness. There's a line right there. I'm gonna go back now. But he's definitely using force suggestion here to kind of get some information from him. So I would assume that this person, since he's a convict, was either around when some Jedi was killed or was maybe wrongly accused of it. And so Master Soul is in here using the Force to get the information out of it. The only thing I would say is this is uncharacteristic of the Jedi during the High Republic for them to use Force suggestion in this way.
Very frowned upon. Yeah.
Very frowned upon. Yeah. So I would, and that even, I'm trying to think, there was an instance in the High Republic so far where a Jedi did do this.
Well, Elzar has done it a couple of times, I believe, because it's Elzar. Back in, I think, phase 1.
Yes. More recently, this was done in the comic book. Someone did this, and they were stopped immediately for doing it.
Well, Keeve did it, I think.
Keeve Trennis.
I think just in the last couple of issues, I think.
Okay. Don't remember if she did or not, but either way, the point still stands. Like, this is not something that they would kind of jump to, even if this was a convict, right? The fact that they're doing this, and again, it could speak to the desperation of the Jedi at this point. How far they're willing to go to kind of walk down that path of, I wouldn't say necessarily the dark side, but certainly the darker side of the Force. But it is an interesting thing that somebody like Soul, you think of the name Soul means sun, right? Sun, bright light, or right. Charles Soule, which was, I thought maybe they named him after Charles Soule. But yeah, somebody like Soul going and doing something like that does kind of speak to the dire of the situation. The direness of the situation. So here's, I don't really have a lot to say on this one outside of it's a shuttle approaching what looks like maybe an abandoned temple. Maybe it's a monastery of sorts. Maybe this guy's not a convict, or maybe he's in a mental ward or something like that. Or maybe he was a former Jedi at some point. Kind of we saw with the Nihil or the Nameless, and what the Nameless did to some folks and kind of institutionalized them because they became kind of mental after having run into the Nameless. But yeah, it could be a couple different things. Not much here, really.
Right. I mean, they do call him a convict, so there's something there. But again, it's curious that he can sense something.
Yep. Definitely more of the, I guess, Kung Fu inspired fighting, Terraskasi fighting. It's this low kind of like where she's that little flip right there, that low kind of center attacking. That's definitely what we saw in Solo.
Right. Yeah. A lot of wire work in this as well. So really high flying kicks and rotations and flips and all this stuff. But what I like about this, what we had with Indara, now what we see with Soul in this fight sequence with May, we see the masters actually being masterful with the Force and with fighting and not even having to draw their weapon. And I like this. I think this is really important for us to see. We actually feel like the Jedi Masters have some tangible advantage over most other beings around them, to where they do feel maybe not like an indomitable force, but they feel like they are a force to be reckoned with, and they feel almost invincible in some kind of ways. And I think that's really important to be able to put the Jedi, I think, back on that pedestal from a master perspective, where we've taken them down a number of rungs over the years, and maybe not within the context of the High Republic, although there's definitely some examples of that. But I think just in Star Wars in general, we've kind of reduced the rank of master to where it doesn't necessarily feel as masterful as it used to be. But I like that we're seeing the masters really step up, and we see why they've escalated to that rank in the order. I think it's really important for us to be able to see and really get confident that the Jedi are something unique and special and powerful. Whichever way the series takes us in that path is fine, is one thing, but I think just being able to see it and that confidence come out and backing it up with action, I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We get to see, and I hope we get to see more of that from Master Soul here as well. Because you can see it on her face. She's actually shocked.
Yeah, there's knowing on her face, like, oh, snap.
Yep. And then he kind of sends her for a little flip there, just ducks. That's really cool how he ducks both of those. 1, 2, 1, 2, and then jumps out of the way. So good stuff there. We get that stuff in Age of Light, Darkness Rises, which is a play on the Last Jedi. Some of the lines that we got from Last Jedi trailer. Vanessa Rowe doing what we all did as kids. Going into the grocery store, opening up the automated doors with the Force.
Right. Even though there's a sensor right above her, but whatever.
Well, like, why was she, maybe she wasn't allowed in here. Maybe she's not been allowed to come in and she just forced her way right in. No pun intended.
Or she's like, I don't use door switches. Were you kidding me?
Exactly right. I don't need your authorization to come in here. I'm Vanessa Rowe.
Right.
Here's the only shot that we got of Kimry, he's kind of hiding. This looks very Andor, by the way, but he's looks like he might be on that same planet that we talked about, maybe potentially being bought to, just because of the same kind of architecture in the background. But definitely looks like he's seen something or is witness to something that he shouldn't be, or maybe he's just hiding. I don't know. This character is very suspicious and mysterious because we don't have a lot to go off of with him.
Yeah, Kamir is kind of an interesting character, and we don't really have anything yet on him, but it does look like he's a bit more of a spying, maybe less so than hiding. I kind of viewed this more as spying in some way.
Okay. I can see that too. Definitely.
Maybe not spying, but checking something out. He's curious and inquisitive about something, maybe an opportunity for a score or something like that.
Yeah.
Because they do say he's living a life of luxury, so you're like, okay, he can't be the absolute scum, but maybe he swindles and a bit of a scoundrel would be kind of neat.
Yeah. So this is, now this next scene here, this is one you talked about earlier. This definitely looks like a flashback scene. You can see from Master Soul's haircut. He doesn't have the long hair.
Haircuts they all regretted, like later in life.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's got the Justin Timberlake curls on top. He's not crazy about it anymore. These guys in the background, if you can see, they're carrying like bowcasters. It's hard to tell in this shot, but he's got one here. This person has one. They've got one hand on the bow itself, and they've got the other hand on the string. Whether they're energy bows or just regular physical bows, I'm not really sure. But whoever this person is, and this is, I don't think a lot of people have noticed this. They're looking at this person on the left hand side. I think we know who this person is because they were shown at Star Wars Celebration, but they're not shown again in this trailer. Kel Naka is with them as well at this point, so it sounds like he was still part of the Order, hadn't really left, and became that solitary hermit kind of character or whatever. But here's where the Star Wars Celebration trailer actually shows what looks to be, I don't know if you got any thoughts around it, but a very large, hulking, what I think is a woman. She's got like a facial mask on of sorts, and she's got a massive sword that she uses, and she's swinging around at this point. But I guess, I think that's who they're looking at. They're not, it almost feels like they're a little bit scared of this person. I guess, any thoughts around who you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, the Jedi are kind of in a spear tip formation, right? Almost like an arrowhead. So it does seem very, very attacking. Maybe you call it a bit of a defensive posture, but something that they would be able to respond to. And again, in the Celebration trailer, we see this person get aggressive with them and actually spear. And I couldn't tell what species she was, but I think had little horns on her head and things like that. It wasn't quite like a Zabrak, but very intimidating looking and very menacing. And so it was a pretty neat character design. And I'm with you. I think that's probably something along those lines, but we had it from the other perspective. Again, we've talked about how this show is going to be showing things from different angles. This trailer seems to be, well, here's the angle you had, and here's a new angle you have this time. We see it at the end of the trailer as well with the Jedi perspective. So it's something like that. But I like that idea. Like some of these flashback sequences are informing the characters of what they've experienced, and maybe not villains coming back to haunt them, but the experiences that have led them to where they're at. So it doesn't look like it's going to be just a single flashback. This seems like this perspective, and this is almost like Last Jedi in some ways of how we had the story evolving and you fill in the blanks as you go. This is almost like The Witcher, if anybody's who's watched The Witcher, and the way that they've, filled in the blanks at times and going back in time. And so it really feels a bit more like that, which I think can be very effective to give you small 2, 3, 4, 5 minute interludes to bring you, and then bring you back to the character to give you that backstory. Yep.
Let's see what else was going on when we cut away. So going back to the Star Wars Celebration footage, we've got it's kind of a same image that we got a little bit later, but Master Soul Yord and Jecki are walking through the ice storm. We see them a little bit later in the official trailer that was released today. It seems like it's just the first part of that scene where they kind of stop in this trailer. In the one that we saw at Celebration, they were kind of making their way through what looks like a blizzard of sorts.
No idea why they're in this blizzard either. It's just so random.
It is so random. And I will say this, that kind of on that note, like the idea that there's a lot of different planets. There's a lot of different locations here, especially when we're only talking about 8 episodes at about 35 minutes each on average.
Right.
Like we're really jumping around to a lot of different planets and stuff. What do you think about that?
I think it's okay. I mean, it shows you that they're active in the galaxy. And again, they're trying to solve a mystery and they're trying to hunt down, Jedi killer, or maybe they're happening in different places and it's almost like Trail of Shadows or even like what we had in The Mandalorian for a while too, with Bo-Katan of trying to hunt this down. It's like it's Mulder and Scully, right? The X-Files.
Yeah.
A bit of like that type of Sherlock Holmes type of thing going on, so that they have to hunt across the galaxy makes a lot of sense. We actually had this in the War of the Bounty Hunters comic book as well. There was the same kind of vibe going. So I think it's kind of cool. It's a little bit different. We'll see how effective it is if it feels like we're just jumping planet to planet, planet of the week type of thing. But I think within the context of what they're trying to do, it makes sense, especially if they're being strung along and led a certain path that ends up in a certain place, kind of like what we see with in the trees in the forest with the red lightsaber coming up.
Yeah. Sorry, I've been kind of ignoring the comments here. Rebel Scum says, what do you think about the Ki-Adi Mundi saying that the Sith haven't been seen in over a millennium, by this time 100 years before the Phantom Menace? Hold that thought.
We're going to get to that.
We are going to get to that. We've got a lot of thoughts at the very end, probably that we'll talk about here in a second, especially when we get to that final scene.
That's a hot topic. So yeah, we'll give that a little more time.
Yep. One Up versus CPU says Emery did. I think Vern got mad. Oh yeah, that's Emery using the Force suggestion kind of thing, getting mad. Caleb's flying in with the Mighty Ducks Flying V. And what if they're on Dalna? That'd be cool. It'd be a callback. Yeah. Dalna was a very important place during Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the High Republic, so it would be great to see them return there. Here's one that I've got, and I honestly just came up with it right now, but I was thinking about the image, and I wish we could show the pictures of this hulking woman that I think is wielding this physical blade. But what do you think about it being General, and now you're going to kill me because I'm going to say General Vice, even though I know that's not the name. Yeah. It's Vice. But General Vice or Vice is a Mary Allen from the from the High Republic. When we get to the very end of the first book in Phase 3, she kind of defeats Porter Engle, but she's somebody who can go toe to toe with the Jedi. She uses physical weapons. She's massive. I mean, she's huge. Going toe to toe with Porter Engle, who's a big person themselves. But we are left to believe that she did live through that battle. But how crazy would that be if they brought her back in here? Now, she doesn't have necessarily the horns and stuff, what it looks like, but she's got a mask on, and she didn't leave that battle unscarred. So maybe she's had to wear a mask. Maybe she's changed her look at some point, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah,
crazy talk?
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's all right. We do a lot of crazy talk, and it's totally cool. So that'd be kind of cool. I mean, again, bringing in characters to refamiliarize, and for the people who are familiar with the content, a character to latch on to, especially characters who were pretty strong, I think makes some amount of sense. I don't think that's the character, but the idea behind it, though, I'm not against that at all.
Thank you, Jonesy. That's a nice way to let me down.
You're welcome.
Two other things that were happening in the celebration piece here. We've got a scene of May just walking through the street, really nothing there. And then we cut to the Jedi igniting their lightsabers. This is the same kind of thing that they do at the very end, only they do it from the front angle. We see them ignite their lightsabers from the side, and they all kind of jump in. This shot is directly in front. And we definitely see in that scene Master Soul and a couple of other Jedi that we're familiar with. And I'm presuming that is the scene just before they fight whoever is the character wielding the red lightsaber at the very end.
Right.
That doesn't line up, though. Like if you go frame by frame at the very end of this one,
they seem ordered very differently. Yeah,
they ordered very differently, and some of those people are not there. So I don't know. It could just be a cut thing. Maybe they did a reshoot, decided to pull them out. I don't know. It could be a change, but definitely not the same folks. At least as best I can tell. Okay. All right. Enough of this. Let's get back to, and I think that's the last bit of Star Wars Celebration Europe trailer footage that was removed from this trailer. Everything else is the same or has been added.
Yeah, Celebration was about half the length of this. Yeah.
Here we go with more fighting. You talked about this. This feels like it's
such a great such a great moment, extending the force out, the blade just inches from her palm.
Is this the same fight scene as earlier, or this is another confrontation?
It looks like the same fight. And that's why I said that maybe this wasn't where she's sitting at the table and gets confronted and they start fighting. They go to a different place where the bar is vacated because it's clearly still kind of a cantina. And we see maybe someone on the floor just laying there. We're not sure if they're unconscious or alive or whatever, but it seems like a continuation of that whole fight and that whole ordeal.
Yeah. I think it's the same fight, but it definitely looks like there's a bar back there. There's also somebody, I don't know if it's this one. We may have skipped over it. It might have been on the first scene.
It's right
it's this
here.
one.
Yeah, right behind her. Yeah.
Right behind her, there's somebody laying there either dead or passed out. You can see them right there.
Right. It is a bar, so either are pretty likely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe they just had too much to drink. That's all. Okay, so more fighting there.
God, Carrie Moss is just such a badass.
Yeah. Here's that imagery. I know this is the one that creeps you out, but this is...
No, I love it, though. It creeps you out in the best way.
Yeah, she's just kind of like snaking her way up, almost coming out of, I don't know where she's coming out, from the ground or through a tunnel down there. I don't know what's going on.
All the people like rise at the same pace. It's like they're part of her cloak.
Yeah.
It's almost like Medusa with the snakes, and they just kind of move with her. It's just so eerie, but so neat.
And this is what I was talking about. We've got somebody named the Mother. She's got blue. We've got her open hands. You can see them.
Yeah,
she's got them exposed, palms up kind of thing. So, maybe they're, true descendants of the palm of the open hand and decided to side with the softer side of that group.
They're a gift given freely.
Gifts given freely, as the term goes. And if you look at, so here's what so you can see this is a character running through the fire, and I don't know if it does really well on the footage that we've got.
Yeah.
But you can see the braids. Yeah. So this is why, and it does feel like this character is much older than the character that we saw on the youngling that we saw. So this looks like a Padawan version of May running through this fire. So this is some kind of trauma. Maybe we get a kind of a Jedi temple on fire kind of thing. Maybe it's similar to Kylo Ren or Ben Solo, where people think that she did something when she really didn't, and so she decided to run because she did. Kids are dumb and they do stupid things, kind of thing. But yeah, I'm assuming that's May running through the forest or fire there.
Yep.
And call back to the I see fire comment. I can't take credit for this one. Somebody said it on Twitter today. Said, who let Vanessa Rowe fly a ship? If you know who Vanessa Rowe is, she's not good at flying. She's terrible at flying. She hates to fly, kind of thing. But whoever this is, at least it's another happy landing. It looks like the cockpit's still intact. But yeah, I don't know why this thing comes crashing in and why these guys are waiting on it. You look at Master Soul and what they're wearing, they're not even dressed for cold weather. So what the heck happened here, right?
I'm lost. Yeah. I'm really lost on this one. This is interesting because nothing in the rest of the trailer really has much in the snow. And then, here they are.
Visually it looks cool. Seeing the ship come crashing in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish we had just the scene before it to see if was there another ship that shot it down? Is there a Sith on board that brought it down? Did they use the Force? Somebody used the Force from down on the ground to bring it down. But whatever it is, it seems like it was unexpected if these shots are kind of together. Of course, we got the lines in here too where she's saying this isn't about good or light or bad. This is about power. Let's see here.
Yep.
What do you make of that?
And who's allowed to wield it? Yeah.
Who's allowed to wield it is the continuation of it. The symbol on her forehead. Any thoughts around that? Because it looks like Nihil-ish as far as the spiral, at least. Maybe not necessarily the exact Nihil logo, but yet another kind of clue that maybe this is the evolution of the path of the open hand.
Yeah, and with the path of the open hand, they evolved from, I think, what was it at the start? It was 3 horizontal lines in phase 2, and then they became the vertical lines, and then they became the lightning bolts. And so I like that this, if there is any relationship to them, the spiraling is
the spiraling supposed to be the storm, by the way, just to kind of.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the eye, right? It looks like a hurricane, but this is actually more of an actual spiral, like a hypnotic spiral that you would see, in a
Optical illusion
musical park. Yeah, those types of things. But it is curious though, and again, it's a good continuation of that. There's just something about these markings on their faces and their hands and things like that just give them a different aura. But again, it's also the infinite aspect of the Force, a focus point within the Force, and that they do it on the middle of their forehead is also probably significant in some kind of way, and again, their approach to it of saying, what power is and who should be able to allow to use it or how much, very reminiscent of some of those. And so I love the correlation that we have, and really hope there's some true tangible connection here.
Yeah. Yeah, and to kind of wax the context of the path of the open hand, I mean, they were a little bit different, and they believe that, the Force shouldn't be used by anybody, and that anytime someone uses the Force, whether good or bad, there is something horrible happens, right? Like almost like the butterfly effect. Something across the galaxy happens as a result of someone using the Force, and so they were against people using the Force. But if they were an extension of that group, it'd be interesting, because now it feels like they're not necessarily about, they're not against people using the Force, but it's really about, it's open to anybody. It's almost kind of it's almost perverse in that way, where before the Force doesn't belong to anyone, therefore nobody should use it. It's almost like the Force doesn't belong to anyone, so anybody can use it, and everybody should be able to kind of wield that power.
Right. And they so believed in balance, is where what you were describing is what happens is when anybody uses it, it's an abomination. It's a manipulation of the Force where you should just enjoy it. And actually, we just did this in the comic book too, in the Star Wars flagship, where we have a Falinasi character that basically says, I don't have to be able to use the Force to love it and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very subdued version of what we get in the High Republic books, but it's that same premise of saying that just because you can doesn't mean you should. And Path of the Open Hand was very much on the extreme of saying, if you use it, the Force is going to balance itself out because you used it without consent or whatever it might have been. And so it's something else is going to do it. So if you saved a life, someone else is going to lose a life that maybe wasn't intended to lose a life. And that's the penance you have to pay for using it in some way, no matter what that might be, not just saving a life, but it shows you though how far they went, that even a good deed would then have to be offset with something, potentially something very severe and very traumatic, that someone would have to contend with as a family or whatever it might be.
All right, let's move on, because we're at the very end here. If I can. All right, so here's May standing on, it looks like Octu. Like I mean, you can tell me it's not. You can tell me it's the just the temple that we saw earlier in the same shot. I get that. Those do look kind of similar. But my gosh, if you look at the background, that looks like, what is it, Skellig Island? What was the name of the island, the real island?
Yeah, Skellig.
Skellig, okay. It looks like that location. The rocks look similar. You've got the greenery kind of going on here. And then when you look at this, she's kind of looking off to somebody. Again, purple robe there. She's looking off into the distance, and I'm assuming that these two are connected. One, she's got something in her hand. I don't know if you can see that. She's clutching something in her hand.
I couldn't tell if that was just her robe or if she actually held something.
Yeah. It looks round.
Yeah, like a
she's
lightsaber.
got a lightsaber underneath it, right? Maybe she's stalking whoever this person is. The person that I think this is, it looks like Vernestra Rowe to me because of the bald head and the way, just the stance with the robes like that. It could be a number of other people. It could be another Jedi that she's stalking. It could be Master Indara. I don't know who else. But I guess the other thing that I want to say is this looks like another scene right out of the freaking Last Jedi. Like the rocks and the water when Rey's on there, and we get that, she's talking about life and balance and good and whatever, blah, blah, blah. All of that looks very similar. It's the area where that pit is, where she goes down and has the image or the visions of herself and all that.
Yeah, the mirrors and all that.
The mirrors, yeah. But it just looks too coincidental, which honestly, I freaking would love the fact that they went to Octu. Like, we got to actually see it in, maybe not like, a bustling kind of thing, but if there was a purpose and a reason why they were here, or that she went there to find this one person. This could be somebody that we've not been introduced to as well, right? Maybe they've taken the Barrage vow and they're doing exactly what, Jedi Master Luke did, or Master Jedi Luke did. Maybe they're out there and she's going to seek them, similar with Rey going up to Luke kind of thing. But I guess any thoughts around what we're seeing here?
Well, I zoomed in an unhealthy amount on this screen to try to figure out who this person was. And I didn't see that it was actually a bald head. So I was really at a loss for who this actually was. They don't look like Jedi robes because they just don't go down far enough. They look like they almost go down to the person's calves, like a long cloak would, almost like what, I mean, not quite as long as what May is wearing here, but I'm really at a loss as to who this might be that she's meeting with. But again, if she took the life of a Jedi, or she needed to have a trophy, or something as proof of her success, then something like that could be to whoever she's trying to impress, or whoever she's, maybe for lack of a better word, working for or trying to please. She's finally confronted. It's hard to tell if this is an actual confrontation or a meetup.
Yeah. Ooh, maybe it's a Bith. I'm kidding.
But I'm with
More
you
on
though.
that later.
But I'm, gosh, but I'm with you though. This is very reminiscent of Octo, to where the imagery, the glassen type of rock, the sharp edges, very much like the cave that she falls into or sucked into, depending on your perspective on that. And so even if it's not just that there's something that has that same aesthetic and that same feel and vibe, I think can be very significant for us as Star Wars fans across an entire saga, not just this one moment in time by itself and isolated. I don't know how I feel about it if it was actually Octo, because I like the idea that Luke went to a place where had been long forgotten. And we could argue that 150 years or so is long enough to be forgotten, but it seemed like it was anciently forgotten, hundreds of years, if not like 1,000 years or something, longer than that in Last Jedi. But again, we can color and interpret some things over time there too.
Yeah. Yeah, you could take that a couple different ways.
Right.
Neil Sega, crazy idea. Is that Octu with all the waves and rocks?
There you go.
Hashtag wishful thinking. Hey, we were thinking it. It's in the show notes, man. So I don't think you're wrong, at least in thinking it.
Hard not to talk about it at the very least, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Caleb says, is she returning that person's lightsaber? Oh, there you go. I mean, that's
an interesting take, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the similarities between Rey walking up on, Luke Skywalker with his back turned like that, returning his lightsaber. I don't know. Maybe it could be. Maybe it's a similar type thing.
Maybe she's in that temple to retrieve an artifact. You were kind of talking a little bit about this earlier, so maybe that's something that she's successful in her mission.
She's bringing to this person.
Yeah, and again, this could be her, evildoer Sith friend.
Yeah, it's Master Darth Tenebrous. Okay,
Darth Vern.
Darth
Vern.
I don't know. She's not.
And then
now,
we get
Keeve
to
Trennis.
Yeah,
no.
Keeve Trennis. Yeah.
That jury's still on Keeve. We don't know what happened to her outside of her becoming one of the Lost 20. Okay, so this is the scene everybody's been talking about. Of course, this scene was not in Celebration. Again, we got to see the Jedi come out. They ignite their lightsabers and immediately cut to the Acolyte logo, and everybody went, bananas and lost their minds. We got even more here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we've got Yord, we've got Jecki saying, "What is that?" Which I thought was awesome. I like the fact that I don't know if she's reacting to, maybe they just heard a noise. It's hard to tell. They've cut this as though they're looking at the lightsaber. That may not be the case, right? She may have heard a noise and she just turned around and said, "What was that?" kind of thing. But it would be kind of cute if she had saw a red lightsaber and was like, "What is that?" Like, I've never seen a red lightsaber kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Or they could be looking at the person itself or that thing, whatever this person is, this thing is, this humanoid is, whatever it is, and she's not familiar with it and she's asking, "What is that?" I don't know if these two scenes are connected, but nonetheless, whoever this person is has got a red lightsaber. They're throwing it, cutting trees down, which I don't really know why they're cutting the trees. I got questions around that. I mean, cool. Visually, it looks amazing. Love the fact that they did that. I've also got questions about, is this one shot where the lightsaber goes and does it come back all the way around? Is it being passed off to somebody else? I think that's stupid, but I don't know. It's just weird the way they cut this, but visually, again, it looks really cool. But thoughts on that before we get into the hand and talk about more about who this person possibly could be.
Well, how crazy would it be if the shot was actually in reverse from how it actually plays into where it's being pulled the other way rather than from right to left.
And they've done that to us before. Star Wars has done that to us. They've reversed shots many times.
They have, yeah. And so it's almost like it's being lit and then called to you rather than being thrown to another person. It is interesting, though, if there's more than one already. Again, with the Sith, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, but with the Sith, though, I'm thinking that we're probably not going to see rule of two stuff happen within the context of the show, but whoever's unveiling themselves with a red lightsaber at the very least. I kind of like of this being a bit of a loner at this point, but showing their power. And this does seem consistent because when the young Jedi turn around, that same background appears to be the same one that they have when they all ignite their lightsaber. So it does appear to be the same scene for them. But are we being a little bit hoodwinked here as to what they're actually going up against? But I mean, what's going to get a rise out of a bunch of Jedi to get them ignite their lightsaber and do it. I think this is all probably the same sequence.
I think so too. At least all in the same shot or the same scene, if not, directly connected and stitched together.
I mean, with the big force, with the big force wave that we get here in a minute, it just all seems to fit, right?
Yeah. I just want to call out one thing. Again, I may be overthinking this because that's what we do here. But if you look, let me go back here so we can go just frame by frame. So when you get a chance, watch this, not here, watch it on your own. But on the right-hand side here, where the first cut of that tree is, there are some lights that are moving as though whoever threw this, and I want to see if I can click on, let me see if I can do this. Yeah, I can do that. So if I go frame by frame.
All right, so this is not in reverse because, the trees are being cut down. I clearly didn't watch this in slow motion.
Oh, no, that's a good point. It's all right. I like what you're thinking, though, because they pulled that crap on us before. But whatever this is, there's something moving with lights, because it's not the same. The camera, yes, the camera is moving from right to left, but there is something moving on its own motion on the right-hand side of that. And, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I've got some theories if they really want to go there, what that possibly could be. It looks like whatever threw this has lights attached to them or is, more machine than man. I don't know. Let's just call it that.
Well,
I'm dancing around something, but we'll save it.
Well, I mean, it kind of does. I mean, Tenebris did have an apparatus.
Oh, you said it. All right, fine. Go ahead. Say it. Tenebris.
Well, yeah. I mean, Tenebris had an apparatus, right?
Yes.
So, there's something there. And Tenebris, of course, was Plagueis's supervisor on call. Now he was his master, so he's the predecessor to Plagueis. So, having Tenebris and having that bridge to where we get to Palpatine, like you said, Palpatine's still another 50 years or so away. So this would be a nice bridge to start to speculate about Tenebris coming in, and a name that we don't really talk about a whole lot, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And again, that's legends, right? Tenebris has never been canonized. Plagueis, not really, but maybe depending on where you draw the line of what was real, what was not, and how much influence George Lucas had versus not, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean that's one possibility. But the other thing that kind of throws that for, I guess, poops on it is the hand doesn't
looks like a human hand.
It looks like a human hand, right? So I hate to rain down on my own parade, but that does look like a human hand. It looks like a very thick hand, so either a bigger person, maybe, I don't know. The hilt looks like a Jedi Guardian hilt, it looks like a Guardian lightsaber hilt. It doesn't look like a Jedi issued one, like we've seen some of the other Jedi wield now, and of course in the High Republic, but it's kind of hard to tell because also, I think we're used to seeing those. I don't know how to even describe this or even show it physically, but the hilts usually go up a little bit higher on the sides with the Jedi Guardian temples, and I don't really necessarily see that here, but it doesn't, because it's got that really long, elongated end and tip to it. That was the only reason my mind went to it, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's it doesn't look like a Sith lightsaber. Let me just put that out there.
Yeah, it's tough. We only see a couple of inches of it, but I mean, again, it's a bit utilitarian, so it's a bit bland in that way. So you could really go either way, and I kind of lean towards this is probably just a Sith crafted lightsaber. I don't know that it's a repurposed Jedi lightsaber at all. And again, things that we may not get the context for in any kind of way. Again, bleeding of crystals and things like that, I'm not anticipating coming across in this series.
No. I mean, that would be cool if we got the story of, someone lost their lightsaber and this is it. And it turned out that, he ended up bleeding, or they ended up bleeding the lightsaber, and we got to see that on screen. Holy bananas. Wow. That'd be great. But yeah, I don't think we're going to get that. It's too much. Plus you'd have a lot of questions being asked by the general audiences who are like, hey, what have I tuned into here?
Right.
The only other thing what I would say, and again, I can't really tell, but it looks like there's hair right here at the very top, almost like a beard or braid of sorts. Again, you're not going to be able to see it on what we're showing now, but if you go back and look, tell me I'm crazy or tell me I'm wrong. It could be anything. It could just be shadows.
It's tough. Yeah, it's tough.
It's really tough. Okay, but nonetheless, here we go with Master Soul igniting his blue lightsaber.
Again, in the Celebration trailer, we saw this kind of from the front. We do see him igniting the saber, same shot, different angle.
Yep. This evoked every fan person's inner screams with them all igniting their lightsabers. This is right out of like the Old Republic.
I gotta admit though, this was cool though. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen this on screen. It's been like Attack of the Clones,
yep.
in live action. So it was really cool being able to see a bunch like a true like Star Wars with Jedi again in live action, not just Obi-Wan and Vader in very isolated ways, but full on Might of the Jedi type of thing. It was I gotta be honest, it kind of hit me. It was pretty cool. But I think also to your point though, when we switch, they do a little switch, a cut in the scene. And it's like different characters. There's some that are still in there, but they don't. You can kind of pick a couple out. You still see Daphne Keene's character still in there. I think you still see Yord in the background. Maybe the guy with the beard, but
the cheap version of Elzar Mann right here. This guy.
Yeah. Because I was looking for him too, because I thought I saw him kind of in the background, but they all seem in different.
He's not there when it cuts.
Well, I think he might. Well, there was someone that kind of looked like him, but very much in the background that you really couldn't see very well. Or maybe I'm just looking too hard for these. But yeah, you see them all igniting, and then there's like a really quick cut because you kind of see him there, right?
I think you do. Yeah, I can see him there at the top, and that actually looks like
Plo Koon.
Plo Koon, who's not. Yeah, well, the Keldor. I don't know if it's Plo Koon, but we're assuming it's Plo Koon.
It's Plo Koon.
Interesting. That Jedi right there, whoever that is with the green lightsaber, he's got armor on his wrists.
Right.
Similar like the Clone Wars armor.
Yeah.
Or more like Old Republic.
Looks like
armor.
more like Old Republic, yeah, from the trailer from the video game.
Yeah. Who the heck is that guy?
No. You need to sign him up though.
Well, here we go. So this is where we cut now, right? And so
some people are calling these orange lightsabers. I think that's actually supposed to be yellow. So I think these are actually yellow lightsabers more so than orange.
I would agree too. Like orange, even in like you didn't have orange until we got to like the Old Republic, like thousands of years before that.
Yeah. So I think these are probably supposed to be yellow, not orange.
I would imagine they are too. I mean, they could be orange. Who knows? But
maybe.
But yeah, like again, like so we don't see Sol. He's not here. He's got a blue lightsaber, and everybody that they show, like you can see as we're pulling back, we got a green, we got a yellow, a green. We have one blue, but that's not, if that's the blue, that's not Master Sol. That's one of the other girls that we saw earlier on.
Right.
So where's Master Sol? Where'd he go?
Yeah, I mean, and you see Jackie in there with the green saber, kind of towards the bottom, just off to the right, like between the yellow and the blue saber. You can see her head kind of peeking through. Yeah, so it's a different crew. You can kind of see a bearded guy just above the horizontal yellow on the right.
Yep.
So that's why I wasn't sure if maybe we were just missing something.
Are we sure that's Jackie though?
I think that's Jackie. She's
Jackie's
the only.
Hair, is her hair that white though?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. No.
She's the only pale skinned, like that pale of a white kind of white face that I've seen so far. But again, it's peculiar. It's like there's a switcheroo happening here, so it's a little curious what we're actually seeing here. Are we seeing two different scenes?
Yeah, but now I see a second blue lightsaber. So here's the girl that we saw in the last shot, and then I guess this is Master Sol here. It's got to be.
Yeah, so it might just be the way that the shot's framed. It's a little bit difficult to see because I mean the darkness does kind of crush some of these browns and the decor of the costumes. So maybe it's just tough to tell.
All right. Well, I think it's again we're like really nitpicking on some of this stuff, right? I think this is all part of that same sequence, same scene.
Yep. At the end of the day, they get their butts kicked.
Yeah, which is the big takeaway. Like the force push is like as powerful as we've ever seen, honestly, especially with this many Jedi. Now, you could make the argument that the Jedi really aren't combat ready as well. Like they haven't really faced a Sith. Like they're probably good against the Nihil. They're probably good at the Drengir at this point, right? They've learned those lessons. But if we take it from the perspective of what we learned in the Phantom Menace, it's been 1,000 years since they faced a user of the Force, or a Sith, if you will. And so things are probably a lot different. They don't just kind of, they're not going to be as ready and probably not expecting something like this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is severe. I mean, this is a whole lot of dirt and dust and smoke and everything kind of, and you see the red, presumably from the lightsaber starting to shine or reflect off of all of this. I mean, someone has hit where you take a 8 Jedi and knock them off their feet and blow them back. That's some serious force power.
Yeah. And that's where the trailer ends. But let's get into, I guess, a couple of things. I guess some additional thoughts around the speculation. Actually, you know what? Hold on. I want to touch on one thing real quick here. Again, powerful scene. if you go by frame, you can kind of see that person's very vaguely. You can see the outline of the figure through the smoke at a couple of scenes, but there's really not a lot there they did a good job of masking who that is, other than just standing there with the lightsaber pointing down. Yeah, not really much to kind of go off of. But I want to talk about the logo because we've not really had a chance to talk about this much. And the more you look at this, I mean, this is a purposeful ring of sorts, right? And I say ring, a circle in the middle of Acolyte. And there's nothing in this trailer or anything that we've learned so far that would lead us to believe this has any significance. But yet it does at the same time, for me at least. Any thoughts around why they are doing this, why it looks like a ring?
Yeah, it's really Darth Sauron, and he's coming to claim his ring back, I guess.
All right, that's fair. I'll take it.
Or a big old O for the open hand. I really don't know. I mean, there's no significance with jewelry or rings or things like that within Star Wars for the most part. And so it's interesting that maybe it's just an effect, for fun, or maybe there's a MacGuffin of sorts that it has some sort of symbolic nature to. It's a little unclear at this point, but I don't really have anything to speculate on beyond that, just because there's so little to go on. We would just have to be making it up.
Mm-hmm. Well,
It's a great effect, though.
It is a cool effect. It's singled out. The O is singled out, and this ring is singled out for some reason. It's metallic in sense. It does look like a ring you'd wear on your finger. And the only thing I could think of, and again, I'm going way in too much to like Lord of the Rings type stuff. Mm-hmm. But the Sith at this time, we talked about Kimiri, right? The smuggler who was into like rare artifacts or looking for things. Tying his character, again, purely headcanon here, but tying his character to this idea that at this time, there's like, the question that I have is, how did the Sith even come about? We know they've been hiding, right? So they could have always been around. Even during the High Republic, they could have just been hiding, biding their time, waiting to reemerge, okay? But at some point, what if someone did come across a Sith artifact or an artifact that was steeped in the dark side? And what if it is tied to a ring of sorts? And this, we don't find this out till a little bit later, but somebody like May comes into power with it and it starts changing her or changes another character. But again, I'm stretching. I think it's a stretch that we would use a ring as an artifact, because I think it's been unprecedented. Usually Sith artifacts are not rings. But we've also seen Luke Skywalker find a lot of weird stuff that the Sith use as artifacts and imbue their memories. I'm not even talking about holocrons, right? I'm talking about other things that they've used, like daggers, and as we saw in Shadow of the Sith.
The helmet with the mask for Momin,
the mask for Momin, exactly. But if there was a Sith at some point who imbued, this ring with dark side powers, maybe this is where at some point this turns up to be kind of the culprit, or maybe just the MacGuffin of it all, of why suddenly the Sith have reemerged again, or they found some secret power, or this is a really powerful ring of sorts. And I know, again, it leans too much into Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying that, but I just find it interesting that there's a ring that's prominently here in the logo like this, and we've not had any mention of it. But yeah.
Yeah, but of course, from a pure design standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, because you can get nice accent coloring and highlighting and things like that going on with the logo. So I look at it from that respect. It's something evidence, but I think that's entirely possible. I mean, if there's something that, again, it doesn't necessarily resurrect the Sith or anything like that, because I think they exist. And we'll get to the comment here that we had earlier about, what about Ki-Adi-Mundi, right? And his comment that the Sith have been extinct for millennia, but that there's something that helps, build that last piece, or there's something that helps their journey on. Because again, the series is supposed to be a bit of a role reversal, to where we look at the underdog, and then the underdog in this case are not the Jedi, and seeing how they survive and how they rebuild or regain their power and accumulate some of this power in the beginning of this, and how the situation and the tables start to turn away from the Jedi. Something like this could play into that to an extent, but having a MacGuffin's always kind of a good thing. I'm gonna chalk this one up. There's probably no significance to it, but if there was, I'm on board with you. I think there's, having something like that just leads the Sith towards their destiny. It's a holocron of sorts, or something that does have some sort of knowledge imbued within it. Then I think something like that could be really cool into helping further the Sith. If there's only one right now, maybe it's some sort of, what's the word? Not omen, but one of the things we get like in Master Apprentice that Dooku and Qui-Gon and all of them were like prophecy type of thing. You find this and you're going to lead to your next apprentice and things like that. So, there could be along those lines, but again, nothing else in the trailer is talking about actually chasing after something. But again, artifacts are artifacts, and they're important because Palpatine and a number of other Jedi and Sith-like characters have been chasing these things for ever,
Yeah. I mean, then One Up brought it up too. He talked about the mother. It was collecting a lot of Sith artifacts, right? The rods and all that. There was the Dobbs character that she had hired at one point to kind of go around and pick some of these stuff up. So it's definitely something that's in play during the High Republic, and it continues to be in play afterwards, with Palpatine coming in, swooping up all those artifacts, and then Luke on his crusade going out there and looking for artifacts and trying to get knowledge of the Sith and the Jedi in both. So. Okay, well, let's get to the $1 million question, right? And we've already talked about Darth Tenebris. And let's get to the question, I guess, about Kia Dimundi, who says the Sith haven't been around for, a millennia. I guess, what are your thoughts around, does this break anything if there is somebody? Is this person a Sith? Let's talk about that, because I know you and I were talking about this, weeks ago, probably a year ago at the time, about whether or not this would be the story that we would see the Sith. Is there someone who's just tampering around with the dark side and is, quote, Sith, but not really following the rule of two, or not necessarily a formalized Sith, right? I don't know. I got some thoughts around there, but I guess your thoughts just in general around, is this person a Sith, or are they just a dark side user right now?
Well, we see a red lightsaber, so I'm going to go ahead and just go all in on it being a Sith, and we just call it what it is. And again, we know the Sith never go away. That the Sith never disappear entirely. They're not really extinct, and there's some theories about why that is, and we actually draw on the High Republic specifically about how this is even possible, because the Jedi, and even Yoda specifically, are okay with omitting certain information and details and withholding from the general population of not only the Republic, but also of the Jedi about certain material and certain information, certain facts that they know, or they want to really solidify what those facts are and see what happens before they then bring it to everyone, or they don't want to incite fear or concern, because again, you can debate why all those are important things for them to withhold, or why they think it's so important. Maybe they're so fragile, or their own fear is getting in the way of some of that. But
it's the fragility, but then I think it also, if you want to tie it to The Last Jedi and what Luke Skywalker was talking about, the hubris, right? And the vanity of the Jedi, like we're better than this, we're bigger than this. We can't let people know that this stuff exists, or that we were, bested by the Sith, because we're the ones, we're the High Republic, we're the bigger, badder people out here right now, right? So it could just be pride. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, because you wouldn't think that associate pride with the Jedi, but that is kind of the Jedi of the time in some ways.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, to an extent, they're so worried about losing, and I guess this goes back to those in power are afraid to lose it, and that's when they start to be corrupt and they start to make concession, they start to behave in ways that are against their own doctrine. And there's evidence of Jedi losing their way in some of that, and that could just be part of the nature of the story. But I think with the saber now, seeing it, and I know we've had Inquisitors and others that aren't necessarily Sith, but this story is about the Sith emerging in some way, the darkness rising, the darkness starting to present itself, but they have to remain in secret. And I think you and I may have been talking about this. This means that there's a whole lot of Jedi not going to make it out of this series. It's going to be dark, because the Sith need to still remain quiet, that the number of people that know is going to be few at the end of the season or series, however we want to phrase that. And that's why I'm really curious what the subsequent seasons of this might actually look like, if they continue down the path of actual Acolyte and Sith and those types of things. But I'm kind of ready for Jedi and Sith to emerge in this secrecy, and that battle to maintain that secrecy for another 100 years, and that tension and the close calls. And this is why I brought up Shadowhunter from the Darth Maul book from Legends, from Michael Reeves, is because it was along those same lines of Maul wants to quench that thirst. He wants to prove his worth, but his master's like, it's not time yet. We're not ready. And maybe this is a time where they're edging out there like, man, we really want to test ourselves. We want to see how we are, but we don't know that we're ready, but we've got a little bit of a brashness within their rank of either someone flying solo, looking for an apprentice, or maybe the rule of two is already still going on here. Because we know that while the rule of two is absolute in this time frame,
Yeah.
They don't always have two. You can still have one. That's okay because you're always looking for your apprentice.
Yeah. And that's kind of where my mind goes too. Like, I think it's fair to say, at least in my headcanon, I firmly believe that there is a Sith, a formal Sith, alive and well right now.
Absolutely.
They're in hiding. They've been in hiding, right? That aligns with what Palpatine said. It certainly aligns with everything we know from Legends. Could they be looking for a particular person? Could they be looking for something to have a kind of a one-up on the Jedi at this time? Maybe it's that ring. I was thinking, someone asked, I think one-up asked, was that May? Is this May that we've got here showing her with the lightsaber kind of thing? Maybe it's possible. Maybe this is the figure that we saw on the shoreline, and May was bringing this person, this red lightsaber, right? To tie it back to maybe she's not, maybe she is corrupt and she's doing something horrible. She could become the first, apprentice of whoever the Jedi, this Sith is, and she may not make it through the end of this season. And season 2 is now him looking for a second apprentice, and maybe that's, again, assuming this is like Tenebris, maybe that becomes Plagueis, right? And they don't have to stick to that, guys, right? I mean, let's all keep that in mind, right? They can rewrite this however they want to. The concept being that the rule of two is established and they are looking for the right time, to your point, and the right person to take on as a formal apprentice and become a Sith Lord as themselves. I think that could be part of the premise of the Acolyte, right? And finally leading up to, the birth of Sheev Palpatine. What if we got into that? Wouldn't that be kind of crazy? Season 3, season 4, we actually see Sheev as a kid and we actually get to follow that journey and how he becomes, Plagueis is now the Sith and Tenebris is now dead kind of stuff. I touted this, remember 6 years ago, I touted what I wanted a Sith TV series to be like. And I said something along the same lines where it was like every season it was a master and apprentice and it was just following them. And you knew one of them was going to die by the end of the season because it was just a rule of two and things were going to happen. And the next season would be them finding a new apprentice kind of thing. That'd be really crazy if this turned out to be something similar. I'd love to see that because we get to see so much of the dark side and the Sith and their ways, the rituals, all of that. Really pulling the curtain back on that stuff, which I think would be fascinating to see canonized and certainly on live television, which we've never seen before on camera kind of thing. Okay, so one other thing then too, I guess the overall question is why Jedi are dying. I do wonder too if that is not because of the secrecy, like you said. Like, I don't expect most of these Jedi, honestly, I don't understand how any of these Jedi can live. Although you said Yord at the very end there was, possibly when he said, how is this, someone's killing a Jedi, how is that possible kind of thing? Maybe that is him living. I don't think he lives for very long because we know that if they are truly to be in secrecy, they're going to cover their trail at all points. And I wonder if the premise of this show, like from the very beginning, we know that Jedi are being killed. What if it's such that one Jedi stumbled upon the secret that the Sith were still alive? And the Sith are now methodically going back and killing everybody that's even closely related or has any knowledge so that nothing can get back to them. And that's the premise of why the Jedi are dying is they're covering their trails and they don't realize that they're doing that simply to hide their secrecy, not because they're trying to get power because they're not ready for that yet, but it's still about waiting in the shadows, waiting in secrecy and making sure that nobody knows that they're there. And so, if someone did stumble across that, whether they're Jedi or even just civilians or whoever it is, no one's making it out of here. That secrecy has to stay quiet unless the only other thing, and you brought up a good point here, because it just happened in the High Republic in Phase 3 during Edge of Balance, right? There were two prominent Jedi on the council who knew that the Nameless were out there and that they had the ability to remove or what do you call it? I would say remove their force abilities from Jedi, whatever the word is there. But they knew about it and they decided those two characters made a decision that they were not going to tell the rest of the council, that it was better not to say anything because they didn't want that word getting out. It's not uncharacteristic of the Jedi at this point because of the hubris, because of who they feel they are and who they think they are, to be able to just kind of brush stuff under the rug and not let anybody know. So that could be another reason too, that the secrecy doesn't get out. People did know, they just never said anything because they didn't want to for all the reasons we just said.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about what's going to bring an order to its knees, I mean, conspiracy is one of the greatest ways to do it. It's one of the tried and true ways of doing it within our own history in real life, with conspiracies of government conspiracies or whatever it might have been, cover-ups, brushing things under the rug. It might also create dissension in the ranks for those that do. If this group of people survive, or most of them survive, and the council's like, oh, we need to keep this quiet, we can't talk to anybody, you can understand, well, that starts to create tension, right? That starts to create unease about your belief system, about whether or not you can actually get behind what your leaders are telling you to do, because it doesn't feel right. It's against your moral compass, it's against what you've been trained to feel is right, and you have that dissension within your own order, and that unease starts to creep up. So, Jedi conspiracy is definitely one of those things that, we know the Jedi are not above doing those types of things. Again, I think their intentions are always good. I think Leslie Headland actually, said that in one of the articles, or probably most of the articles, of, the intention of the Jedi, they don't intend to be bad people. They intend to do good. They are generally trying to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean that they're infallible and make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you make really bad decisions that are bigger than what you realize. And the more you let those fester and go on for, the worse things get, until you've got a bit of a cancer within your organization.
Yep. I got one last question. It's a serious question, but at the same time, it's not. Where the hell is Yoda at? Because, like,
he's right where he always is in the High Republic, somewhere else. Yeah.
Somewhere else. He has been mysteriously missing from a lot of the main events that happen in the High Republic. And I get why he is. We've talked about this when we've covered the High Republic stories, that he is the Luke Skywalker of the time. He shows up and it's a game changer, right? We saw it clearly. You've got it there for Midnight Horizon, right? He completely changed the tide of a battle, and he has the ability to do so. But, the question, that question is going to surface, and I will continue to ask it, if this really all is happening, how is Yoda not plugged into it? How is he not part? As now he's also a member of the council here during this time, and I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he shows up in this series. They could be saving it. He could have a cameo where he's just on the Jedi Council, and then, he took a sabbatical while all this is going on. Or it could just be that whoever is doing all this is covering their tracks so well that Yoda is unaware of that it's going on, right? Or even if he got word that the tracks were covered so well that he has nothing to go off of. Now that seems a stretch given what we know about Yoda and how powerful he is. But that question is still going to nag at me, and not just Yoda. We talk about Yaddle. We can talk about Yara Proof. There's a number of other Jedi that we've seen in the High Republic that are very good at what they do. And so that question is going to be there for me, is like the balance of how do they not know, and how does this not encroach upon the Kia di Mundi quote of the Sith have not been around for millennia, right? Red lightsaber. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking Sith, right? So I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but it's just something I think we'll have to continue to watch and talk and speculate on as the series goes on.
Yeah, I'm really worried what it's doing to the legacy of Yoda in some ways, to where, because I don't even know what's worse, Yoda knowing and being part of the cover-up, or Yoda not knowing at all and becoming Grand Master of the Jedi Order and still not knowing that this was prevalent through the entire time. I don't know which one of those I'm more worried about being reality.
Yeah. Well, at some point we need to talk about Yoda, because I don't know how. I feel very conflicted about what they've done with his character over the last 5 or 6 years.
It just doesn't feel right that he's not in vast quantities of material. And I understand wanting to explore new characters and things like that. I think they could have woven him in a way that would have made sense and worked, and not made him feel so absent all the time.
The absenteeism is bothering. Yes, I'd agree 100%. But the other thing is just some of his decisions, like. Yeah. Yoda was the first action figure that I remember wanting to buy, and I looked up to him as a kid ever since Empire Strikes Back. And I don't know, it's a little tainted now, right? Maybe that's that old saying of never, what is it? Never grow up to know your heroes because you'll be disappointed kind of thing. Maybe it's something similar to that. But he has made a lot of questionable decisions. He's done a lot of questionable things, and he's not infallible. I'm not saying that. I think they did a pretty good job during the Clone Wars of kind of him confronting himself and all of his, his maybe not so bright and shinier moments or aspects or characteristics and traits. But I don't know. It's just weird that he is absent for so many of these large events that are happening during the High Republic. We'll see. We'll see how Phase 3 happens too. Like, he could be the hero that saves everything and does everything along with Avar Kriss. But anyways, I think we can end the show here. I think we've done enough here, and we've certainly armed you. If you've stuck around for this entire almost 2.5 hour episode, we've armed you with enough to go into work tomorrow and really just talk about this thing like, every detail. Of
everything we know. That's
everything we know in terms of what happened and what we saw and what we speculated on and what we can theorize on.
Yeah, well, what I saw tonight was an amazing group of people over in our live stream, Albert. And I'm going to roll through all of these names, and it's going to take us another 20 minutes to get through it. Tons of people in the background, but we saw Alex, My Star Wars Guys, Stephanie, Qui-Gon J, Sky, Diego, One Up versus CPU, Jenny, Kathy, JJ Skywalker, Music Train, Cube Dude, Skywalker's Academy, Katya, Rebel Scum, Jorge, Neil Sega, Caleb, Don Turbo, and then Vader's Girl, our girl, Kat, coming at the very end. Appreciate everyone coming out. Everyone who didn't say hi, please, we would welcome you to subscribe to the channel if you're new, if you liked what you hear. If you did, please leave us a comment. Let us know what part of this trailer you're most excited about. What parts do you agree with, or what part did we miss that you think is going there? What do you think the legacy of the Sith is going to be? What the heck is going on with Yoda? R2 Tron just popped in there as well, asking about your shirt. So you'll have to answer that one after the show. But yeah, leave us a comment. Hit the like button if you wouldn't mind. If you did like the video, we'd love to hear your comments, and appreciate you all coming out and listening to this no matter when you listen to it.
Yep. Hey, quick programming note. Jonesy and I will be back in a couple days, in 2 days, literally, to break down the latest episode of The Bad Batch. And then this weekend, Lauren and I are going to be covering Defy the Storm, which is the most recent novel from the High Republic. And Jonesy and I will have a Patreon show on Sunday night for all of our Patreon subscribers as well. So plenty of more Star Wars content. We will, of course, stay on top of all the Acolyte news as it comes out. I don't know that we'll get anything here over the next couple days or weeks, but at some point, the media train has already started. It's taken off. And so we'll start getting, the typical stuff. We'll start getting little teasers and, more interviews with the people. Not a lot of leaks and stuff, but definitely things that we may be able to kind of cobble together and put a show. But when we have enough, we'll definitely come back and certainly cover all that.
Yeah, if you think about it, we have about a little over 2.5 months before the premiere, which is a lot of time for us to start to fill in some of the blanks. So as that relevant material comes forward, you can count on us to bring you the content that seems to matter, that you guys need to be ready for, to prepare yourself for the series and things that come up that might change our perspective on what we've seen so far in the trailer. So it's going to be a busy couple of months for us here, but we're excited for it.
Yep. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for joining again on the live stream, and we'll see you all here in 2 days to cover The Bad Batch.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.